Hey guys, tonight we're stepping quietly into the humid twilight of a medieval European bathhouse. Candles flicker in wrought iron sconces, shadows stretch along the stone walls, and a sweet sour mix of sweat, herbs, and wet wood clings to the air like a blanket. The floors warm from the stoked fires below, and somewhere deep inside the steam, someone laughs too loud. Probably someone who's been soaking for a bit too long. You push open the heavy wooden door and step inside. A wave of heat greets you, instantly fogging up your eyelashes and making your linen tunic feel like an old dishcloth. Welcome to one of the only places in the Middle Ages where people of all stations could, quite literally, strip down and share the same hot water. But don't get too comfortable just yet. This isn't the kind of spa day you're used to. There are no fluffy robes, no cucumber water, and certainly no soothing whale noises playing over hidden speakers. What you do get is a sloshy wooden bench, some questionable soap, and the very real possibility of accidentally sitting in someone else's rinse bucket. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're tuning in from somewhere far off, I'd love to know. Drop your location and local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The bathhouse is already full. Steam hovers like a ghost above the pools, curling around ceiling beams and dripping in lazy rivulets down the plaster walls. You trudge in, your shoes squishing from the condensation, and immediately feel the presence of others. Some chatter softly, others lie draped over benches like sleepy lizards on warm rocks. You spot a wooden counter near the entrance. Here's where you pay, if you're not important enough to bathe for free. Prices vary depending on the town, the temperature, and the presence or absence of fleas. You hand over a small coin, and the attendant nods, barely looking up from the basin she's scrubbing. She's missing 3 teeth and humming a lullaby that hasn't been sung outside this village in 100 years. The changing area is communal. You undress quickly, keeping one eye on your bundle of clothes and the other on a group of chatty but sleepy-looking tradesmen. There's no modesty curtain, just a mutual agreement not to stare too long. A helpful boy hands you a rough linen towel, still damp from its last use, and gestures toward the warmest pool with a twitch of his eyebrows. As you step closer to the water, you notice the layers of heat. The outer pools are lukewarm, meant for lingering. The central bath, directly above the stone-heated furnace below, is piping hot. It's the kind of hot that makes you question your life choices as you ease one foot in, then the other, slowly lowering your body with all the grace of a boiled turnip. And then it happens. Relief. For the first time all week, your shoulders unclench, your spine sighs, your pores seem to whisper, "Thank you." You float for a moment, nose barely above the waterline, and feel centuries of dust and mild regret drift away. The architecture is surprisingly elegant. Narrow windows let in stripes of moonlight, but they're too high for peeping. The roof arches like a whale's rib cage, and candlelight flickers across pale murals painted in a time when dragons were semi-believable. The tiles under your toes are uneven, stained with thyme and turmeric, and probably someone's forgotten lunch. There's no music here yet, just the occasional splash, the creak of wood as someone shifts, and the faint hissing of boiling water being ladled into the bath by a red-faced assistant. Occasionally, a pigeon thuds onto the roof and shuffles with the tragic dignity of someone who missed the memo about indoor plumbing. One man is shaving another's head in the corner using a blade that looks more like a bread knife. An elderly woman is massaging someone's shoulders with a bundle of what might be herbs or might be weeds from the ditch outside. You're not sure, but it smells vaguely of mint and wet dog. Mainstream historians agree that medieval bathhouses weren't just places to clean up. They were community centers, date spots, and sometimes informal courts. More than one deal was brokered between soaks.
But historians still argue whether co-ed bathing was truly common across the continent or exaggerated by later chroniclers trying to spice up their otherwise soapless manuscripts. You lean back, head resting on a folded bit of tunic you swiped from the bench. It smells like lavender and mildew, a strangely comforting combination. The air is thick, the flickering light plays tricks on your vision, and the warmth wraps around your body like a sleepy python. And just when you think you've reached maximum relaxation, someone gently taps your shoulder. A young boy offers you a sliver of something resembling soap, white, crumbly, slightly gritty, and smelling faintly of lard and old pears. Ah yes, the medieval spa experience, full of mysteries, mild discomfort, and moments of absolute peace. The boy doesn't say much. He just hands you the soap-like lump with the solemnity of a priest handing over a sacred relic. You nod, unsure if you're supposed to tip him or just not drop the thing in the water. It's not exactly soap the way you know it. Medieval soap is more of a hopeful suggestion, a gritty blend of rendered animal fat, ashes, and, if you're lucky, some dried herbs to mask the undertone of barnyard. Still, it works, mostly. You rub it between your palms, and it reluctantly lathers into something resembling suds. As you smear it across your arms, it squeaks slightly on your skin, like you're washing with a damp candle. The man beside you notices your hesitance and chuckles. "New?" he asks. You nod. He offers a tip. Rub downward, not in circles. The dirt listens better that way. You're unsure if that's science or superstition, but you follow his advice anyway. It's as good a time as any to align your exfoliation technique with medieval cosmology. As you scrub, your skin begins to tingle, not unpleasantly, more like it's remembering how to breathe. Dirt lifts away in quiet ribbons. It's both disgusting and deeply satisfying, like peeling old wallpaper off a long-forgotten wall. You steal a glance at the water around you. It's getting murkier by the minute. Best not to think too hard about the ratio of steam to stranger. You move to the rinsing station, which is really just a giant bucket and a ladle. You douse yourself with the lukewarm water and sigh. It drips down your back in winding rivulets, catching at your waistband and pooling at your heels. The towel you were handed earlier now sits in a damp pile by the bench, absorbing nothing and everything all at once. You opt to air dry like everyone else. Just sit, steam, and let nature take care of it. Here in the bathhouse, time bends a little. No one is checking sundials. There are no rush hours. Only the slow rhythm of dripping water, rising steam, and low conversation. You feel like you've entered a space outside the usual rules. Sacred, but in a sweaty, communal kind of way. Soap, or some version of it, had existed since Roman times, but its popularity waxed and waned throughout the Middle Ages. In some places, fragrant oils replaced soap entirely, while in others, people believed vigorous rubbing with rough linen was more natural. Historians still debate how widely soap was used across classes. Some argue it was a luxury. Others claim even peasants made rudimentary bars from kitchen scraps. One popular variant you overhear someone mention is pastille soap, which sounds fancy but is mostly olive oil and soda ash. It's considered high-end stuff, often reserved for nobility or people with coin to spare. You, on the other hand, are probably exfoliating with the village blacksmith's leftover bacon grease.
A young woman nearby adds sprigs of lavender to her wash water. The fragrance cuts through the damp musk and momentarily makes the place feel like a garden, or at least a garden shed. You smile, half asleep already, and take in the moment. Strangers chatting like old friends, the comfort of warm water, and the shared agreement that, for now, no one is thinking too hard about tomorrow. Suddenly, someone slips nearby, foot against slick stone, and catches themselves with a loud splash. Everyone turns for a second, then resumes their scrubbing. No injuries, just a little pride left behind in the puddle. It's hard not to feel a little more human in here. Stripped of layers, literally and socially, people seem gentler.
The town drunk is being gently bathed by his niece. A stern-looking merchant is chuckling with a carpenter as they exchange stories about stubborn goats. No one's posture screams knight or lord. In the bath, you're just warm, wet, and equally wrinkled. One corner of the room features a separate basin for feet only. Apparently, it's considered rude to let your toes mingle too freely with the general pool. You wander over, lower your feet in, and yelp softly. It's even hotter than the main bath. The woman beside you grins. "Good for bunions," she says, tapping her calloused heel. You're not sure what a bunion is exactly, but she seems convinced. Medieval foot care, like everything else here, is a curious mix of superstition and improvisation. You hear murmurs about bathing feet in cabbage water, massaging with pig's milk, or wrapping toes in heated cheesecloth. The logic? Who knows? But your feet do feel oddly refreshed. Behind you, someone is gently humming. It's not a tune you recognize, something old, wordless, and winding like ivy. It floats above the noise, threading through the steam, lulling your thoughts into a soft daze. You let your eyes close for just a moment, head tilting forward, breath slowing. The bathhouse may not be clean in the modern sense, but it's honest. It smells of people, herbs, wood smoke, and wet linen. Every creak and splash tells you that hundreds of people have done exactly what you're doing now. And somehow, that's comforting. You stretch out again, arms resting on the edge of the tub, the last bit of soap still clinging to your fingertips. A flickering candle throws your shadow onto the wall behind you, warped, a little wobbly, and somehow more relaxed than you remember being in weeks.
You shift a little, letting the heat of the bath seep deeper into your spine. The stone bench beneath you, slick but oddly welcoming, feels like it's molded just for your hips. Though, let's be honest, it probably wasn't designed with ergonomics in mind. A strand of steam curls up near your ear, and for a moment, you imagine it whispering something soothing in medieval Latin. From the far side of the bathhouse comes a sudden chorus of splashes. Someone's thrown a bucket of cold water over their head and is now yelping in high-pitched Old French. A few people chuckle, one mutters something about waking up the saints, and then it's back to the usual hushed murmur. Here, the line between bath and theater is a fine one. You glance around, noting a small wooden partition at the far end of the room. A handful of people are filing through it slowly, towels wrapped tightly, some looking downright sleepy. That's the massage and scraping area. Yes, scraping. You're about to experience one of the Middle Ages' favorite spa treatments, the strigil rub-down. Now, if you're picturing a soothing Swedish massage, erase that image. This is more like being cleaned with a bent spoon by a determined aunt. The strigil, a curved metal instrument dating back to Roman times, is used to scrape oil, sweat, and dirt from the skin. It's not painful, exactly, but it's not winning any awards for comfort. Your turn arrives. The attendant, a man who looks like he's carved from seasoned oak and has zero interest in your life story, gestures for you to lie on a wooden plank. You do, cautiously. He slathers a warm, slightly viscous oil across your back, olive maybe, or walnut, with a faint trace of rosemary, and then begins the rhythmic scraping. The sensation is specific. A little rough, slightly ticklish, and vaguely like being de-iced before a medieval takeoff. You try not to tense up. The man hums under his breath, a tune without urgency. Maybe it's a lullaby, or maybe it's just his version of elevator music. Your muscles relax despite themselves. Scraping, surprisingly, was considered deeply cleansing. Without modern soap and loofahs, this was how you sloughed off the week's regrets. Historians generally agree on its popularity, especially among the upper and merchant classes. But scholars still argue whether strigil sessions were strictly hygienic or also symbolic. Some claim they had spiritual or even status-based meaning, like, I'm not just clean, I'm cleaned by Gregor, who only does guildmasters on Sundays. As the session continues, you start to float somewhere between awareness and dreaming.
The rhythmic scrape, the warmth of the oil, the low echo of dripping water, all of it combines into a strange, cozy lull. You half expect to open your eyes and find yourself in a Turkish hammam or Roman thermae. But no, still medieval Europe, still slightly smoky, still you. After a final swipe, Gregor pats your back with a folded cloth and nods. You slide off the bench with the grace of a half-boiled potato and make your way back to the main bath, your skin tingling like it's just had a polite argument with a pine tree. There, someone offers you a drink. Not wine, not beer, but something called posset. It's a warm medieval beverage made of milk curdled with ale or wine, sometimes spiced. You sip. It's odd, a little creamy, a little sharp, like someone tried to make a smoothie with intentions rather than fruit. Still, in the glow of the candles and the comfort of the bath, it goes down easier than you'd expect. Drinking while bathing isn't just tolerated, it's encouraged. In fact, many bathhouses have attached taverns or servers who bring trays of food and drink. Nothing like biting into a hunk of boiled meat while surrounded by half-naked townsfolk discussing wool prices and miracle sightings. You overhear someone whispering about the healing qualities of the water. Some towns claim their bathhouses are fed by sacred springs or blessed by saints. Whether it's divine intervention or just good plumbing is up for debate, but one thing's certain, people believe in the bath. The warm air thickens again, heavy with lavender, sweat, and damp stories. A man nearby speaks softly of his recent pilgrimage, how he stopped at bathhouses along the way, and swears this one cured his cough. Another woman nods along and adds that her daughter's skin condition cleared after 3 visits. Could it be the herbs, the scraping, the sheer amount of boiling water? No one knows for sure. Of course, not everyone trusted the bathhouses. Some thought soaking too long could weaken the humors or allow evil spirits into the body through the pores. Others worried about modesty, especially after dark. Still, for most, the benefits outweighed the risks. And besides, a little spiritual vulnerability is a small price for a warm soak. You settle back into your spot in the pool, still warm from earlier. Your skin feels oddly polished, like someone's turned the saturation down a notch. You're relaxed, cleanish, and surrounded by the soft murmur of voices that blur into a kind of human lullaby. And as your fingers wrinkle further, your thoughts begin to slow. This isn't just hygiene, it's ritual, community, and comfort rolled into one damp, steamy, slightly herbal experience. You're not just bathing, you're belonging. A wooden gong sounds from somewhere near the entrance, deep, mellow, and deliberate. You look up, unsure whether that means someone's lost a sandal or if it's just time to rotate. Turns out it's the latter. A grizzled man with impressive eyebrows informs you with a grin that the sweating hour is about to begin. You blank? He points toward a small adjoining chamber, dimly lit and fragrant with resin. You're gently ushered in with the rest of the bathhouse regulars, many of whom bring along linen wraps or bundles of herbs tied with twine. This is the sudatorium, a medieval steam room and the final boss of relaxation. The door creaks shut behind you, and the heat hits almost immediately. Not in a harsh way, more like being hugged by a giant, slightly damp sheepdog. The walls glisten with condensation, and the air smells faintly of pine, vinegar, and people who genuinely believe in the power of nettle infusions. You take a spot on one of the benches. They're low and broad, built of wood that's been worn smooth by centuries of sweaty thighs. Someone tosses a ladle of water onto the hot stones at the center of the room, and a hiss of steam rises like an ancient spirit returning from a long nap. The sweat begins almost immediately. It beads at your temples, gathers in your elbows, and makes your lower back feel like it's hosting a tiny, enthusiastic waterfall. Everyone else is equally damp, but no one seems to mind. There's a kind of solidarity in shared perspiration. You glance at a boy next to you, and he shrugs like to say, "Welcome to the sauna of questionable medical theories." Medieval people believed sweating could purge bad humors, flush out sin, and rid the body of everything from melancholy to misplaced ghosts. Better out than in, someone says, possibly joking, possibly quoting a 13th century physician. Some patrons gently beat themselves or each other with small bundles of herbs, mostly birch, sage, and occasionally something that looks suspiciously like nettles. This practice is said to stimulate circulation, but honestly, it mostly feels like nature trying to spank you for fun. You're handed a sprig of rosemary, and, not wanting to offend the rhythm of the room, you give yourself a hesitant pat. It smells delightful and stings just enough to keep you awake. The woman next to you offers a helpful tip. If it burns, you're doing it right. Despite the heat and the slow drip effect on your energy levels, you start to feel clearer, lighter, like your thoughts have gone through a rinse cycle. The sweat carries away more than dirt. It seems to wring out the little tensions of the day. The ache in your shoulder, the worry you forgot to lock your medieval front door, the guilt over stealing an extra barley bun at breakfast.
Historians still argue whether these sweating rituals were more medical, social, or spiritual. Some texts describe strict regimens. Sweat for a quarter hour, rinse with cool water, drink a cup of mead, repeat. Others imply it was mostly a chance to gossip and occasionally see the town reeve in his underpants. And gossip they do. From the corner, two elderly women exchange scandalous whispers about a merchant's daughter and a monk's sudden interest in embroidery. Another pair speculates on whether the Baroness's rash is a punishment from the saints or just bad shellfish. You pretend not to listen, but let's be honest, you're completely invested now. Your breathing slows. The air is thick, yes, but strangely nourishing. Each inhale carries the faint bitterness of herbs, the mineral tang of stone, and the warmth of centuries. You realize your muscles are humming, like they've been steeped in tea. This room isn't just hot, it's healing, or at least convincing enough to make you believe it is. A boy pipes up to ask whether steam can cleanse the soul. His mother gently bonks him with her herb bundle. "Only if the saints approve," she says. The boy nods solemnly, which seems like the correct medieval protocol for mystical hygiene. You lose track of time in the best way. Minutes ooze past like honey. The steam swirls in hypnotic patterns, catching the flicker of torchlight through a high window. Someone begins a quiet chant, a simple melody, wordless and slow, and soon a few others join in. The sound reverberates off the stone walls, turning the room into a living bowl of sound and sweat. You're not sure if it's dehydration or enlightenment, but everything feels peaceful. You've reached peak Bathhouse. Eventually, a gentle tap on the door signals it's time to cool down. You shuffle out with the others, your skin glowing like you've just been polished with warm butter. The sudden rush of cool air feels like a blessing. You exhale deeply and slowly, and your breath steams like a satisfied dragon. Outside the Storytime, a long bench awaits. You sit, legs outstretched, and someone hands you a cool cloth for your forehead. It's soaked in rose water, and as it touches your skin, you almost sigh out loud. You notice now how much your body hums, not in discomfort, but in that strange, fuzzy afterglow that only comes from complete, unapologetic sweating. The man with the eyebrows claps you on the back. "Not bad for a first-timer," he says, and disappears into the fog.
You sit quietly for a while, towel draped around your shoulders, watching as droplets fall from the tip of your nose like tiny medals for effort. The bathhouse is still bustling, but it's a slower, dreamier bustle now, like everyone's been partially melted and is content to puddle quietly near the warm stones. A server glides by, offering a small clay bowl. You peer inside. It's filled with pale, jellied cubes swimming in honey. You tentatively pop one in your mouth and are met with a strange combination of sweetness, lemony tang, and, is that gelatinous calf's foot? Yes, it is. Congratulations! You've just had medieval gelée, a delicacy made from boiled down animal parts flavored with herbs and fruit. Before you gag, too late, know this: In its day, this was peak wellness cuisine. Rich in collagen, difficult to prepare, and perfect for showing off your cook's talent and your stomach's bravery. Your neighbor sees your expression and chuckles. "Good for the joints," she says, patting her knee. You nod politely and decide maybe 1 cube is plenty. You rise and wander slowly to a quieter area of the bathhouse. A small alcove dimly lit with beeswax candles and decorated with embroidered cloths and religious icons. This is the cooling lounge, where bathers go to rest, reflect, and gossip under the pretense of divine contemplation. You recline on a padded bench, surrounded by murmurs in Middle English, Low German, and something that sounds suspiciously like early Italian opera warm-ups. A young girl hands you a cup of Hippocras, a spiced wine served lukewarm, and you sip it slowly. It's clove-heavy with notes of cinnamon, nutmeg, and the vague sensation that your grandmother might have invented it. Here, the bathhouse reveals its secondary function, a social salon. Medieval bathhouses weren't just for cleanliness. They were where deals were struck, marriages negotiated, poems recited, and, occasionally, secrets exchanged in voices low enough to be swallowed by steam. A monk sits a few feet away, scratching a quick note onto a wax tablet. He glances around, closes it discreetly, and tucks it into his robe. What was he writing? A love letter? A draft of his next sermon? Or maybe just a reminder not to eat gelée after steam sessions again? Historians still argue whether the bathhouse served more as a center of moral decay or a rare equalizer across social lines. Certainly, in some towns, bathhouses were frowned upon by clergy who believed naked chatting led to dangerous temptations. In others, even bishops soaked alongside brewers, tailors, and wandering musicians. Context, as always, is everything. You eavesdrop on a discussion about the recent import of Turkish towels, so soft they feel like kissing clouds. Another group debates whether boiled birch bark can truly cure baldness. You sip your Hippocrates and consider the fact that, despite a few centuries of technological advancement, we're all still obsessed with skincare, fashion trends, and hair loss. A man with a lute strums lazily in the corner. The melody is slow, lilting, and just out of tune enough to feel charmingly rustic. You don't recognize the song, but someone hums along, and soon a gentle chorus begins, half-hearted but warm, like the heat clinging to your skin.
You lie back. The bench creaks under you, but it's comforting somehow. Your hair is damp, your bones feel soaked to their core, and your thoughts drift in that post-bathhouse fog where everything feels mildly unreal, like you might float out the window and hover above the rooftops in your towel. You glance up at the ceiling. It's wooden, with smoke-darkened beams and carved rosettes that catch the candlelight. One of them seems to wink at you. That may be the Hippocrates talking. There's a moment of quiet as the lute player trails off and someone gently snores from a nearby bench. The entire bathhouse seems to exhale at once. Then, softly, someone says, "Time for the hair wash." Wait, there's more? You're ushered over to a basin area where a wide-eyed teen with a jug of warm rosemary water awaits. You kneel on a low stool as she pours the fragrant mixture over your scalp in slow, deliberate streams. She begins massaging with a paste made of soapwort and ash, her fingers surprisingly firm and practiced. The sensation is divine, tingly, soothing, and slightly fizzy, like your brain's been unplugged and now it's gently rebooting. The paste foams slightly, and she adds a splash of rose water for good measure. You're pretty sure your scalp is being treated better than your entire body's been all month. She rinses your hair with another jug of warm water and towels it dry with a square of scratchy linen that smells faintly of lye and sun. You feel like a medieval cat, freshly washed, slightly bewildered, and ready for a long nap in a sunbeam. Of course, not all bathhouses offered such luxurious services. In smaller towns or colder regions, baths were simpler, just a wooden tub in a communal yard or behind the local inn.
But in thriving urban centers like Paris, Nuremberg, or Budapest, bathhouses grew into multi-sensory sanctuaries. Some even had musicians, perfumers, and, in certain questionable cases, optional companionship. But let's just stick with the rosemary rinse for now. Feeling light and slightly boneless, you drift back toward your bench. The lights have dimmed further, and the hum of the room has softened into a sleepy blur. You catch sight of your reflection in a small mirror, cheeks flushed, eyes half-lidded, hair slightly herbal. You look peaceful. And just as you settle into the cushions again, a server approaches with a plate of spiced nuts and dried figs. Because, naturally, even in medieval Europe, a spa day wasn't complete with snacks.
You're not entirely sure how many figs you've eaten, but it's enough to warrant a quiet, satisfied sigh. The mixture of honeyed sweetness, the crunch of almond slivers, and that vague hint of saffron clinging to your fingertips. All of it pairs oddly well with the rosemary still lingering in your hair. The room is quieter now, as if the steam itself has lulled everyone into a temporary truce with the waking world. You rise, towel wrapped loosely around you, and shuffle toward a smaller door off to the side, half hidden behind a hanging cloth that smells like lavender and soot. Through it, you discover another chamber, cooler, tiled in blue and green, and noticeably quieter. A sign painted in delicate calligraphy reads something along the lines of "Repose for the clean and courteous," which, frankly, feels like a dig at your pre-bath self. This is the nap room, or at least a proto-nap room. Medieval bathhouses often included rest chambers where patrons could lie down, wrapped in warm blankets or cloaks, and let their bodies dry slowly in the ambient warmth. No one says a word. Voices here are replaced with the soft sounds of breath, the creak of settling wood, and the occasional gentle snore that vibrates in rhythm with the candle flicker. You pick an open couch, a narrow bench padded with straw-stuffed cushions, and stretch out under a woolen throw. It smells faintly of lanolin and thyme. Across from you, an older woman is already asleep, her mouth open just enough to catch a passing fly, though none dare buzz in this sanctum of steam-induced serenity. Above you, the ceiling is painted in faded frescoes, stars, angels, and one scene that appears to be a man riding a large, vaguely offended-looking goose. You stare at that one the longest. Is it a metaphor, a saint's vision, or just a painter having a bit of fun while high on boiled turpentine? Historians still argue whether these repose rooms were seen as essential to the bath experience or simply a trendy luxury among wealthier patrons. What's clear, however, is that medieval folk understood the concept of full-body relaxation on a level we rarely give them credit for. You let yourself drift. The linen wrap at your waist feels soft now, almost invisible, and your limbs sink gratefully into the mattress like dough on a proving bench. The noise outside the room is a distant hum. Someone hums a lullaby near the doorway. No words, just soft, circular melodies. Your mind wanders. You imagine the life of a professional bath attendant, skilled in massage, soap making, water temperature management, and conversational politeness. In some cities, these workers formed guilds, complete with codes of conduct and secret recipes for medicinal scrubs. You wonder if there was a master bather exam. Probably involved identifying fungus by scent and keeping a straight face while applying mustard plaster to someone's armpit.
As you lie there, a memory stirs. Earlier today, a bathhouse worker mentioned the 3 temperatures of humors. Not moods, but bodily fluids. Medieval medicine, rooted in Galenic theory, believed your body was ruled by 4 humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Pleasant, right? Each person had a natural balance of these, and ailments were believed to stem from excesses or deficiencies. So the bathhouse became more than a place to wash. It was, in a sense, a water-based rebalancing chamber. Hot steam for phlegm, cold plunges for bile, scrubs to draw out corrupted blood. You chuckle quietly to yourself, all this because you wanted to get clean.
A server tiptoes through the room, placing a small sachet on each bench, bundles of dried herbs wrapped in muslin, lavender, mint, sometimes chamomile if you're lucky. You pick it up and bring it to your nose. It's calming, earthy, and oddly reminiscent of a medieval grandmother's linen drawer. It's easy to forget, in this soft haze of blankets and fig honey residue, that outside these walls lies a very different world. Dirty streets, unwashed wool cloaks, the constant stench of horses and fish, and whatever combination of despair and garlic lives in a medieval alley. But in here, you're wrapped in a dream. This bathhouse is a small rebellion against the grime and chaos of the outside world, a fragrant sanctuary, a damp utopia. A pigeon coos softly outside the high window, perhaps reminding you of time, or perhaps just auditioning for your dreams. The candlelight dances across the tiles like golden fish swimming upstream. You shift slightly and feel something crunch beneath your elbow. A fig stem, of course. You brush it aside and laugh under your breath. The longer you lie there, the more you feel time slip away. You have no idea how long you've been in this bathhouse. Hours? An entire afternoon? A week? It doesn't matter. Here, minutes stretch like warm wax, and your body agrees to forget the clock ever existed. And just when your mind starts to drift completely, a distant bell chimes, soft, hollow, barely audible. It's not a warning, not a command, more like a gentle nudge. You sit up slowly, blinking at the candlelight and brushing herb dust off your chest. Around you, other bathers are staring. Someone sneezes, someone laughs gently. It's not the end of the journey, just an intermission. You stretch. Everything pops. Shoulders, knees, possibly your soul. And then someone mentions it's time for the herbal steam cave.
You shuffle toward the next chamber with the slow, syrupy gait of someone who's just woken from a nap so deep it might have legally counted as hibernation. Your joints feel like well-oiled hinges. Your skin carries the faint perfume of thyme and old linen, and you're starting to suspect that one of your fingernails still has a rogue fig seed lodged under it. The attendant at the arched doorway doesn't speak, just gives you a small, knowing nod and gestures for you to enter. You step inside, and it's like walking into the lungs of an enchanted forest. The air is thick, not quite hot, but dense with fragrant steam. It coils gently around your ankles, rising in slow spirals until your whole body feels hugged by invisible vines. This is the herbal steam room, an innovation of sorts, developed in certain bathhouses to both treat ailments and satisfy those bathers who weren't quite ready to re-enter the world of cold cobblestones and noisy merchants. The scent is overwhelmingly green: basil, mint, fennel, perhaps even a touch of marjoram if you sniff deeply enough. It smells like someone tried to steam clean a salad, and oddly, it's wonderful. You settle onto a wooden bench. It's been warmed just enough to feel like sunlit stone, and as you exhale, your breath comes out in little clouds, instantly snatched up by the mist. Historians still argue whether these steam chambers were rooted in ancient Roman practices, revived by medieval architects, or were more directly influenced by Islamic bathhouse traditions, spreading into southern Europe through trade and conquest. Regardless of their origin, they became a staple in higher-end bathhouses by the late Middle Ages, especially in places like Prague, Venice, and Constantinople. A woman near you is gently massaging her own temples with oil from a tiny glass vial. Another bathgoer hums softly, perhaps a lullaby, perhaps a ballad of someone who fell in love with a goose disguised as a knight. Medieval lyrics can be surprisingly open-ended. Your own eyelids grow heavy again, not from fatigue exactly, but from the overwhelming softness of everything. Even the candle flames seem to flicker in slow motion, as if they too are trying to relax. Above you, the ceiling disappears into the thick vapor, giving the illusion of infinite space. You feel like you're sitting inside a warm cloud, the kind that smells faintly of parsley and soap. To your left, an older gentleman in a towel murmurs something about leeks. You nod as if you agree, because, frankly, you do. Leeks are underappreciated.
You wonder briefly whether anyone's ever tried to live in a bathhouse permanently. Just stay. Sleep on the benches, eat the leftover figs, become the mysterious steam dweller who whispers spa recipes in rhyming couplets. There's something timeless about this space. No clocks, no windows, just breath and warmth and the occasional creak of the bench under someone's shifting weight. A bucket of herbs stews in the corner over a small flame, releasing more aromatic fog every few minutes. You get whiffs of rosemary, yarrow, maybe even a trace of juniper. It's like being gently smothered by a medieval apothecary. Some bathhouses of the time used these herbal steams medicinally, attempts to cure everything from melancholia to gout. A particularly bold doctor in 1392 claimed that thyme vapor could align your humors, your teeth, and your moral compass. You're not sure about any of that, but your sinuses do feel spectacular. A small wooden sign by the bench reads, "Please do not debate theology inside the steam cave," which, given the era, makes perfect sense. Theological debates had a nasty habit of turning bathhouse discussions into full-blown fistfights, especially when wine was involved. Speaking of which, someone passes around a clay cup of spiced water, cool, infused with rose petals, and maybe a hint of cinnamon. You sip, it's delicious, and probably safer than the well water outside, which, according to a pamphlet you saw earlier, has a high chance of giving you the stomach weasels. Delightful. You lean back and feel the sweat start to bead on your skin again. Not the urgent sweat of labor or stress, but the slow, contented kind that tells you your body is finally doing something useful, like flushing out whatever was making your joints click like castanets. The attendant returns and ladles more water onto hot stones. A sudden hiss fills the chamber, followed by an aromatic gust of mint and sage. Everyone groans in pleasure. It's a communal sound, not unlike the shared sigh of a crowd watching fireworks or the synchronized purr of 20 cats sunbathing. Somewhere behind you, a harpist begins to play. Yes, an actual harpist. You didn't even know there was a harpist in the building. The melody is slow and meandering, the kind of tune that makes you think of moss-covered bridges and overly dramatic weather patterns. You smile. This is ridiculous and perfect. There's something almost holy about it. The hush, the herbs, the invisible strings of sound weaving through steam. No sermons, no scriptures, just water and warmth and shared exhalation. A bathhouse might not be a church, but in this moment, it might be holier than one. You stretch your toes, they feel like warm dumplings. Eventually, someone mutters, "Time to cool down," and a few bathers begin to shuffle out toward the next chamber. You stay put, not out of stubbornness, but because your legs have decided they now belong to the steam. You'll join them in a moment. Maybe two. Definitely before the harpist starts playing sad ballads. Probably.
You finally peel yourself off the wooden bench, legs a little wobbly, as if they've partially dissolved into herbal jelly. But you're still upright, which, all things considered, is a triumph. You pad slowly across the slick floor, following a quiet procession of similarly dazed bathers, men and women both, draped in linen wraps, gliding forward like ghosts who've just remembered they have somewhere to be. The next chamber is significantly cooler. Not cold, mind you, no one's tossing buckets of snow, but cool enough to make your damp skin prickle. The walls are stone again, pale and gently curved like the inside of a clamshell. A narrow channel of water trickles along one edge, catching the lamplight and tossing it up in playful flashes onto the ceiling. This is the cooling room, or frigidarium, as it might have been called in earlier Roman-influenced times. Historians still argue whether these spaces were intended more for health regulation or social transition. Was it about closing the pores after a long sweat, or just a polite way to signal, "All right, enough lounging, let's dry off and gossip near the ivy wall"? Either way, you're here now, and the room invites you to linger. Wooden chairs with simple cushions line the perimeter. You sink into one and exhale through your nose like an old bellows. Your hair, damp and heavy, sticks to the back of your neck. Somewhere behind you, someone's stomach growls audibly. There's an answering chuckle from across the room. Hunger is universal, even in a place of refined sweat. A young servant appears with a platter of snacks. Nothing too rich,
just slices of soft cheese, a pile of dried cherries, and two kinds of bread. One spiced with caraway, the other with what you suspect might be anise. You take one of each because choosing feels impossible right now. As you choose slowly, a group near you is deep in discussion about the city's newest bishop, who apparently owns 3 dogs and possibly a tame lynx. This is said with great suspicion, as if the lynx may be a metaphor for something unsavory, like excessive coinage or a fondness for foreign spices. Conversation in the cooling room is quieter than in the steam chambers. The echoes are gentle, and laughter comes in muffled bursts. This is where the mind stretches out after the body's been worked over. It's a kind of reawakening, like rejoining polite society after drifting among the clouds. You glance around and spot a wall mural, faded but still vivid. It depicts a procession of animals dressed as nobles. A boar in a fur-lined robe, a fox with a lute, a donkey in a bishop's hat. You stare at it for a long time, unsure whether it's meant as satire or some kind of deeply medieval horoscope. A man beside you clears his throat and mutters, "That fox used to be my landlord." You're not sure if he's joking, but you nod anyway. The room smells faintly of lavender and citrus peel, probably from the linen wraps stacked by the doorway. You make a mental note to steal one of those scents for your future home, assuming you ever leave this bathhouse, which frankly is becoming less certain by the minute. In some cities, these cooling rooms doubled as tea salons or reading nooks. The well-to-do would gather here for post-bath poetry readings, light business negotiations, or subtle matchmaking efforts. A perfectly timed sigh in this room could lead to a marriage proposal or a minor trade agreement. You do your best to sigh charmingly, just in case.
One of the attendants strolls by holding a basket of tiny cloth sachets, herbal compresses meant to ease tension in the neck and shoulders. You take one without hesitation. It's warm, smells like chamomile and maybe old parchment, and when you drape it over your collarbone, you feel your brain temporarily shut down in the best way. A gentle harp melody, yes, she's back, wafts in from the previous chamber. The same tune, but slower now, almost sleepy. Either she's gradually lulling everyone into a nap, or the harpist herself is beginning to doze off between chords. Either scenario is acceptable. One bather, wrapped like a burrito in 2 towels, begins softly humming a folk song about a cabbage that became king. You let the lyrics drift past without trying too hard to follow them. This is not a time for critical thought. It's a time for absorbing mild absurdities like a sponge. Above you, the vaulted ceiling creates a quiet acoustic pocket where even a dropped fig pit would sound dramatic. You wonder how many secrets have been whispered in this room. Business mergers, forbidden romances, culinary disappointments. Perhaps even a few plans to steal the bishop's alleged lynx. Another historian, whose name you can't quite remember, once claimed that bathhouses like these functioned as the true epicenters of medieval urban life. Forget the churches or courts, he argued. This was where the city's pulse beat, where ideas fermented, where rumors incubated, where people became their most human selves, warm, half-naked, and curious. And now, as your limbs start to cool, your breath evens out, and the harpist stumbles slightly on a high note, you feel it too. A sort of hum beneath your ribs. Not a literal vibration, but a social one. You're no longer just a visitor. You're a molecule in the greater steamy soup of this curious civilization. Eventually, someone calls gently from the hallway, an invitation to the next chamber. You rise slowly, scoop up the last bite of cheese, and follow the others, leaving the cooling room with your mind a little clearer, your skin a little tighter, and your heart just a shade more amused than it was an hour ago. The corridor beyond the cooling room curves like the neck of a swan, its stone tiles gently grooved by centuries of wet footprints. You shuffle along with the other bathers, still half wrapped in linen, feeling a bit like you're in line for some enchanted medieval amusement ride, except this one smells of rosemary and sandalwood instead of popcorn and regret. You arrive at what appears to be a courtyard, open to the night sky, though enclosed on all sides by the bathhouse walls.
The air is crisp but not biting. Stars twinkle lazily overhead, as if they've also just emerged from the steam and can't be bothered to shine too brightly. A crescent moon hangs crookedly, like it's trying to get a better look at what's going on below. This is the rest garden, a kind of transitional space between hot and cold, loud and quiet, body and soul. In Latin, it might have been called the viridarium, though depending on the region and time, it went by many names. Historians still argue whether these rest gardens were primarily functional, used to prevent dizziness after intense heat, or symbolic, designed to evoke paradise, a brief Eden of vines and benches. You pass under a trellis wrapped with sleeping jasmine vines. In spring, it would bloom white and wild, but tonight it's just green and soft, like the idea of a nap translated into foliage. Benches of worn marble ring the garden. A tiny fountain trickles near the center, and a few lanterns flicker along the low walls. You choose a spot under a fig tree, bare now, but thick with the promise of future fruit. There's a blanket draped on your bench, and you take it without shame, wrapping yourself like a sleepy moth in its cocoon. The garden is quiet, but not silent. Somewhere nearby, a cricket is testing out a new rhythm. The water burbles contentedly. A man a few benches over coughs once, apologetically, then settles back with his hands folded like he's attending a very small, very boring lecture from the moon. You let your eyes drift, catching the architectural details in the dim light. Here a chipped fresco of vines and pears, there a carved column in the shape of a fluted mushroom. The bathhouse clearly didn't skimp on whimsy. You suspect someone on the design committee had a thing for forests and possibly edible ceilings. The stories that unfolded in places like this could fill volumes. There are recorded tales, scrawled in the margins of ledgers or whispered into legal testimonies, of secret deals struck in garden corners, poetry recitals by lovesick students, even an incident in Paris where a goat wandered into a rest courtyard and refused to leave for 3 days. The goat apparently had excellent taste.
You lean back, exhaling slowly. The air smells faintly of pine needles and old stone. Somewhere, faint music plays, flute this time, or maybe a reed pipe. It blends with the natural sounds of the garden like it belongs there, a melody without urgency. A servant approaches, barefoot and silent, and offers a bowl of warm, spiced wine. You accept it gratefully. The first sip is a lazy firework, cloves, honey, maybe orange peel. It spreads down your chest like a good memory you'd forgotten until just now. To your right, 2 older women are exchanging recipes. One insists that duck eggs make for fluffier flatbreads. The other swears by soaking wheat overnight in apple vinegar. You're tempted to ask for copies, but decide instead to just listen and let the warm wine handle your curiosity. Above, a bat flutters once, disappears again into the eaves. A passing monk, not an uncommon visitor here, nods at you solemnly, then sits cross-legged on a nearby bench, clearly entering some sort of post-steam meditation. There's a plaque near the fountain, barely legible in the moonlight. You squint and read it aloud under your breath. Peace dwells where water waits. You have no idea what it means, but it sounds pleasingly vague, like something someone wise would mumble before vanishing into a hedge. The bathhouse garden is the sort of place where time folds in on itself. 10 minutes pass, or maybe an hour. There's no bell, no horn, no ding to tell you when the next stage begins. You simply sit until your limbs say, "All right, that's enough," or until the blanket no longer holds back the night chill. You think back to Roman villas with their courtyard atriums, to Japanese bathhouses with mossy paths and lantern-lit corners, to Moroccan hammams that spill into tiled courtyards full of tea and songbirds. Cultures across time and geography seem to agree. After sweating like a roasted pear, one should rest like a very contented fig. It's humbling, in a cozy way, to know your experience echoes thousands before you. You're part of a lineage, Not of kings or scholars, perhaps, but of people who know the value of pausing between extremes, who understand that after heat comes cool, and after chatter comes hush. A breeze dances through the garden. You pull the blanket tighter and sip the last of your wine, now barely warm. The flute music fades. Somewhere, a door creaks open, signaling the journey isn't quite over. You rise, slowly, joints popping softly like the final kernels in a medieval popcorn fire, and prepare to follow the path once more.
You step through an arched doorway that leads into a low-lit corridor, this one lined with rows of cubbyholes and hooks. This is the dressing and grooming area, often called the apoditarium in classical bathhouses, though in later medieval establishments it might simply be known as the robing chamber, or something charmingly ambiguous like the room with the hats. The walls here are a warm ochre, textured like dried figs, and the floor is strewn with faded rush mats to keep bare feet from slipping. Your hand at a towel that's been drying near a clay stove. It's warm but just shy of toasty, and you find a nook to settle into, the bench carved with initials and symbols from countless past visitors. Someone has scratched a crude heart next to a goose. The meaning, as always, is unclear and possibly alarming. This is where you begin to transform from a temporarily amphibious, steamed dumpling back into a regular land-dwelling human. Around you, the pace is slower. People speak in hushed tones, as if in a library devoted exclusively to moisturizers and beard oil. The grooming stations vary in complexity. At one end, a merchant is carefully twisting his mustache into a shape resembling a question mark. At another, a young page is oiling his arms like they're prized garden tools. You, however, focus on brushing your hair with something resembling a hedgehog on a stick and applying a scented balm made, according to a whispery attendant, from almond oil, beeswax, and a secret third thing. It smells faintly of thyme and smugness. Historians still argue whether medieval bathhouses provided these grooming luxuries as part of the package, or if they were add-ons, like scented lotions in modern spas. In some cases, guests brought their own grooming kits. In others, the bathhouse supplied everything, sometimes even sending attendants around with tiny pots of rosewater or, if you were very lucky, ambergris-infused cologne. A large copper mirror hangs nearby, slightly warped like a funhouse relic. You glance into it and are startled to see your face looking unusually serene, if a bit flushed, like you've just returned from a very wholesome duel with several hot towels. A young boy, likely an apprentice, offers you a sliver of dried apple dipped in cinnamon. You thank him, take a bite, and discover that in this setting, even humble fruit feels vaguely divine. It's soft at the edges, chewy in the center, and pairs weirdly well with your post-bath complexion. You pass by a dressing screen made from stretched parchment, behind which someone is humming a lullaby in a dialect you don't recognize. Probably a regional variant of, "Please don't look over here, I'm retying my tunic." There's a small table near the back, covered with combs, jars, and mysterious vials, likely a donation from a traveling apothecary with dreams of passive income. A handwritten sign above reads, "Use sparingly unless your head itches, in which case, use generously." You select a comb and begin teasing the bathhouse out of your hair. The teeth snag slightly, but there's something soothing about the ritual. You think of grooming as a kind of punctuation mark, a curly ampersand after the long sentence of steam and scrubbing.
Across the room, two friends are having a slow, murmured argument about which herb makes for the best beard scent. One insists on lavender for its calming properties. The other votes for rosemary, citing its alleged memory-enhancing effects. You consider weighing in with, why not both, but decide to let them spiral into olfactory madness uninterrupted. In a corner, someone is arranging small slips of paper on a tray, tokens perhaps, for tipping attendants or for booking a future bath time. A few scribbled notes catch your eye. One reads, "Good soap today, less goat than last time." Another says, "If you find my sandal, it owes me money." The last is a poem,
surprisingly tender about the feeling of stepping onto a warm stone floor. You mentally add that one to your list of favorite things, right after toasted towel. It's worth remembering that in many medieval cities, bathhouses doubled as social hubs, places for matchmaking, gossip, and the occasional unofficial business meeting. Some even had attached salons or reading rooms where literate patrons could peruse saints' lives or herbals while getting their cuticles seen to. In some parts of Europe, barbers were a fixture of the bathhouse world. Yes, the same ones who also dabbled in light surgery, dentistry, and gossip control. A trim and a bloodletting? Why not both, you brave and beautiful contradiction? You pull on a soft linen robe provided by the house. It smells like chamomile and lime dust, and fits just slightly better than you expected. There's something comforting in how it hangs, like an old friend who knows how many cinnamon buns you've had and loves you anyway. A bell chimes faintly in the distance, not urgent, more like a friendly cow letting you know there's hay somewhere. It signals that the last chamber of your visit is now open, the nap room. Or, more accurately, the final repose hall, though no one really calls it that, except one slightly pretentious scribe who keeps trying to popularize it. You tie your robe's belt with the air of someone who has completed a gentle quest. There were no dragons, but there was definitely steam, spiced wine, and a mildly judgmental duck mural. Honestly, you're not sure which was more challenging. As you head toward the final space, you catch your reflection once more in the copper mirror. This time, you give yourself a little nod, the kind of nod people give after solving a puzzle box or remembering to water a plant before it died. You've earned your rest.
You shuffle forward, robes swishing, feet whispering against the stone, as you enter what can only be described as the medieval world's version of a chill-out zone, the nap chamber. There's no official name for this room across most records, though some call it the resting hall, others the stillness alcove, and one particularly flowery travelogue calls it a sanctuary where steam-drenched souls sink into serenity. You decide you prefer nap chamber. It gets to the point. The first thing you notice is the silence, soft and golden. Not the awkward kind, but the warm hush of a room designed for breathing slower. Even the candles seem to flicker more considerately here, their light diffused by pale muslin veils strung across the ceiling like suspended clouds. The scent is subtle. Beeswax, dried rose petals, and perhaps just the faintest trace of laundered fleece. And over in the far corner, there's a single lute resting against a stool, as if its player paused mid-ballad to go have a think about life. Around the room lie rows of reclining benches, some padded with folded cloaks or cushions, others lined with furs or woolen blankets. Patrons are draped across them like cats in afternoon sun. One elderly woman snoozes upright, her chin resting gently on a bundle of mint sprigs. You take a spot along a gently creaking wooden bench, half shaded by a tapestry depicting what might be the legend of St. Bubbles, an imaginary figure who may or may not have converted a village using only eucalyptus steam. The bench is surprisingly comfortable, shaped to the human form in the way that only 1,000 naps can shape furniture. You lie back, adjusting your robe, and feel the residual warmth from someone who left only moments ago. A little unsettling, yes, but also comfortingly human. An attendant drifts by, ghost-like in slippered feet, and offers a small ceramic cup of warm, spiced milk. It's seasoned with nutmeg and a pinch of clove, perhaps intended to lull the senses into surrender. You sip slowly, letting the warmth settle in your chest like a tiny, agreeable furnace. Now, here's the odd bit. Some bathhouses were known to employ what we might call professional lullaby tellers. These weren't exactly singers or bards, but people, often older women, who would recite stories softly, rhythmically, in a monotone that blurred somewhere between prayer and bedtime ramble. Their tales ranged from saints' miracles to mildly scandalous local gossip. And then Gertrude married the cooper's apprentice, though everyone knows she fancied the baker's boy.
sleepy intrigue. Historians still argue whether this service was officially sanctioned or just a natural evolution of gossip meeting drowsiness. Regardless, you can imagine the charm. Lying there, steam-soothed and balm-slicked, while someone murmurs a tale about a knight who once tried to joust a windmill and married a sheep by mistake, allegedly. The room hums with tiny sounds, the scratch of a wool blanket being adjusted, the creak of a stool under someone's feet, the softest sighs escaping unconscious lips. It's communal, but intimate. You're not alone, but no one expects anything of you. Not a word, not a smile, just your presence, folded gently into the scene.
You begin to wonder about how sleep itself was understood in medieval times. It wasn't quite what we experience today. For starters, many people likely followed the so-called biphasic sleep pattern. That's right, you'd sleep a few hours after dusk, wake around midnight to pray, snack, or, you guessed it, gossip in a bathhouse, then drift off again until dawn. A strange but oddly appealing idea. 2 sleeps, double dreams, a nap with an intermission. As your thoughts drift, you notice a curious fixture near the fireplace, a wooden box with tiny drawers. It's a scent chest containing dried herbs, little bundles of wool infused with rosewater, and sometimes tiny cloth tokens embroidered with charms for restful sleep. You recall that one 14th century manuscript recommended sniffing lavender before bed or placing chamomile under one's pillow to ward off night fidgets. Quaint? Sure. Effective? Who's to say? But you're definitely not feeling any night fidgets right now. Only the slow melt of your limbs into this nap-stained bench. A chubby tabby cat pads silently into the chamber. No one claims it, no one minds. It climbs onto a nearby patron and immediately curls into a ball. In some bathhouses, cats were unofficial mascots, allowed inside for their mouse-catching skills, but staying for the adoration. You half expect this one to start collecting tips. A few murmurs float from a pair of visitors near the entrance, whispering about which bathhouse in Prague has the best goose fat oil rubs. You file that away for your imaginary travel itinerary. Then, like mist dissolving, their voices vanish, swallowed by the hush. Overhead, the muslin veils shift slightly in a breeze you can't quite place. The fabric undulates softly, like sails waiting for dreams to carry them somewhere warmer. You're on the verge of drifting off when you feel a gentle tap, a wooden bowl offered by a sleepy-eyed teen in a tunic 2 sizes too big. Inside the bowl, a single square of honey-drenched oatcake and a slice of apple. Apparently, dessert, or maybe a very medieval version of turn-down service. You chew slowly, letting the sweetness pull you further into the haze. There's no pressure to sleep here, only permission. And yet, you begin to feel that odd heaviness in your limbs, the tug of your thoughts towards strange dream logic. Why is that duck wearing a crown, and should you be worried? One patron across the room shifts and murmurs something like, "Don't forget the onions," before dozing back off. You nod, as if you agree. Maybe we shouldn't forget the onions.
You're still nestled in that half-dreamy warmth, your limbs languid and your thoughts syrupy, when you become aware of a faint sound drifting from the other room, something between a splash and a glug. You rouse yourself just enough to pad quietly through the curtain and follow it. Beyond the nap chamber lies an area less talked about in the refined chronicles of medieval bathhouses, but no less beloved, the splash pool. Now, let's not get carried away. It's not the kind of splash pool you'd find in a Roman villa or a modern spa with LEDs and gentle whale music. No, this one is a deep, stone-lined basin about the size of a generous horse trough, filled with cool, fresh water that trickles constantly from a carved spout shaped like a lion's mouth. The air is sharper here, and your skin, still humming from the earlier warmth, tingles with anticipation. This is the plunge pool ritual, a sudden, invigorating dip that was believed to stimulate circulation, close the pores, and, depending on the bathhouse's region, either restore your humors or scare away minor demons. You sit on the edge and dangle a toe in. It's startling, like being licked by an icy ghost, but oddly pleasant. A group of regulars nearby chuckle at your hesitation. One of them, an elderly man with a chest like a knotted oak root, dunks himself with no ceremony at all and resurfaces with a gasp that somehow turns into a satisfied laugh. You steel yourself, breathe in, and slip under. For a brief second, the world narrows to water and breath and heartbeat. The cold clamps around your skin like a firm handshake from winter itself. Then you break the surface, sputtering quietly, but feeling as if your brain has been defogged and polished. This, you realize, is why people came here, not just to get clean, but to feel reborn. The sudden contrast between hot and cold gave bathhouse goers a sensory reboot, and while not everyone was fond of the shock, many swore by it. Some bathhouses added small touches to the plunge experience. A few dropped citrus peels or crushed mint into the pool. One Hungarian record mentions floating petals, perhaps for scent or simply for ambience. Another describes a tradition where bathers would murmur a protective charm just before dipping, like, "May my bones stay warm within, though the devil chills my skin." Rhyming, of course. Everything sounds more magical when it rhymes. Historians still argue whether this cold immersion had more spiritual than hygienic function. Was it a bodily ritual or a soul rinse? Some churches saw it as a form of lay baptism, especially when bathhouses neighbored monasteries. Others just liked the tingle. After a few minutes of cooling, you settle onto a smooth rock ledge, steam still rising from your skin like a simmering pudding. You're joined by a chatty older woman who's brought a handful of rosemary sprigs, which she dips into the pool and uses to flick droplets onto her arms. "Wakes the blood," she whispers with a wink. You nod solemnly, though part of your brain wonders how many bathhouse flicking techniques exist. Probably more than you'd think.
She tells you, without being asked, about her cousin's encounter with a traveling apothecary who recommended cold water bathing for melancholy. He was sad about a girl who ran off with a candle maker, took 3 baths and a fennel tincture, and he was cured. Or married. Or both. You laugh softly, the kind of laughter that stays inside the chest and doesn't bother the air too much. Your eye catches a niche in the wall where little towels are stacked, some clean, some obviously reused, some that appear to have been made from repurposed tunics. In wealthier establishments, bathers might receive embroidered cloths. In simpler places, you got what you got. Nearby, a small wooden sign hangs crookedly above a hook. "Do not wash your chickens here." You assume it's a joke, until you remember reading that some rural visitors did occasionally bring livestock into the baths. Chickens, dogs, and once, according to a very exasperated 15th century clerk, a goat named Barnaby the Unwise. You towel off and notice the curious sense of social equality this place fosters. In this steamy microcosm, peasants and merchants, bakers and beggars all occupy the same slippery stone. Robes equalize. There's no velvet trim or signet ring in here, just bath-wrinkled fingers and the sound of someone humming off-key in the corner. Some bathhouses even had rules about gossip, strictly forbidden. Or at least forbidden unless amusing. That meant no political scheming, but local rumors were fair game. A sign in one 14th century establishment read, "Speak softly, speak truthfully, and leave the mayor's business at the door." But did people always obey? Of course not. You overhear one patron quietly discussing a rumored tryst between the spice merchant's son and a candlemaker's apprentice. Not the same ones from earlier, but clearly something's going on with medieval candlemakers. The cold water seems to have shaken the sleep out of your joints, but your mind remains tranquil. You watch droplets fall from the ceiling, condensation gathering, then letting go like little decisions. Drip, drip, drip. The soundtrack of relaxation. The woman beside you sighs, folds her rosemary sprigs into a little cloth, and rises. "Time for a hot poultice," she mutters, and disappears through the archway. You linger a moment longer, allowing yourself the quiet sensation of contrast, warm to cold, tension to ease. It's easy to imagine why people would build their weekly rhythms around this place. Why, even with the occasional soggy goat or gossipy neighbor, they returned again and again. One more splash from the lion spout, a final tingly dunk. And with that, you rise, wrap yourself in your now steam-scented robe, and step back into the hazy warmth of the bathhouse proper.
You shuffle slowly back into the bathhouse's steamy heart, limbs tingling from the cold plunge, your robe clinging just enough to remind you of its rough weave. The warmth seeps back into your skin like honey soaking into bread. Around you, the rhythm of the space continues. Low voices, dripping water, and the occasional splash punctuate the gentle hum of communal stillness. It's here, as you meander past a low curtain and into a side alcove, that you come across a scene that would surprise many modern visitors. A group of bathhouse goers sprawled on low, padded benches, not bathing, but dining. Yes, tonight, you're discovering another crucial part of the medieval bathhouse ritual: eating. Now, bathing and feasting may seem like odd companions. After all, today's spa etiquette frowns upon food crumbs in the whirlpool. But in medieval bathhouses, especially in more urban or well-to-do towns, the line between bathhouse and banquet hall was much blurrier. In front of you sits a spread that would make a monastery cook weep with envy. There are stewed apples with cinnamon, flatbread still warm from some nearby oven, and soft cheese flecked with herbs. A dish of pickled onions emits a vinegary perfume that somehow doesn't clash with the steam, but merges into it, an olfactory ballet of unexpected harmony. You're offered a seat by a cheerful man in a damp wool cap, who cheerily slides a plate your way and introduces himself as Just Martin from the Fishmonger's Lane. He pushes a cup toward you, some kind of mulled ale, warm and slightly spiced, the medieval cousin of a sleepy time tea. Nothing helps digestion like hot beer and boiled beets, he says, toasting your health. You sip, and while you're not entirely sold on the beet part, the rest is surprisingly comforting. Eating while wrapped in a robe among strangers would seem bizarre in most settings, but here it's completely natural. It speaks to the bathhouse's role as a social hub, equal parts cleansing station, therapy lounge, and town square. In cities like Nuremberg or Bruges, food was not only available in the bathhouse, it was expected. Some larger establishments even had separate kitchen staff. One chronicle from 15th century Germany describes an enormous bathhouse feast featuring roast goose, cabbage stewed in honey, and a staggering variety of pastries. The same account also records a small scandal involving an eel pie and someone's mother-in-law, but the details are, sadly, smudged by time. Historians still argue whether these meals were part of a wider hospitality tradition or just a clever business model. After all, if a bather stayed for 3 hours, why not feed them? Some bathhouses charged for food, others included it in the bathing fee. A few rare bathhouses were even sponsored by guilds or noble patrons, allowing them to serve food freely to the townsfolk, a sort of semi-public welfare bath. You bite into something flaky and sweet, maybe a pear tart or a fig pasty, and look around. One woman dips her bread into her bath water, shrugs, and eats it anyway. Another has brought a tiny pouch of salt to sprinkle on her eggs. It's like an indoor picnic hosted by mildly damp eccentrics. And the conversation? As varied as the meal.
To your left, 2 bakers debate the correct flour ratio for oatcakes. To your right, a boy no older than 12 is solemnly explaining the concept of dragons to a man who is either deeply entertained or just very polite. And behind you, someone is telling the tale of the bathhouse bear. You perk up, because of course there's a bathhouse bear. As the story goes, some decades back, in a town near the Bohemian border, a traveling merchant brought a young bear cub with him, intending to sell it as a curiosity. The bathhouse owner, on a lark and possibly several ales, bought the creature and named it Barnabas. For a year, Barnabas lived in the bathhouse, eating scraps, splashing occasionally, and once stealing a butcher's lunch.
Eventually, the town council insisted he be relocated to a nearby monastery's garden, where he lived out his days in contemplative, if slightly steamy peace. Whether or not Barnabas ever learned to enjoy herbal compresses remains unknown. The storyteller wraps up just as the candle in the center of the table gutters out. Another is quickly lit, casting flickering shadows across the gathering. A woman clinks her cup to get attention and offers a toast to warm water, full bellies, and dry toes. Everyone drinks, and you do too, because truly, what else could one wish for? As the meal winds down, you realize this moment, this communal eating, this blending of food and steam and laughter, wasn't just a luxury of the past. It was a vital balm for medieval life. In an era marked by uncertainty, illness, and rough roads, bathhouses offered something rare: comfort. And it wasn't just for the elite. In fact, food within bathhouses was often one of the few places where classes mingled. A noblewoman might nibble next to a washerwoman, each momentarily freed from their social roles by steam and shared stew. Of course, the system wasn't perfect. One record from Avignon mentions a disagreement that escalated over the last honey cake. The cake survived, but friendships were wounded. As your eyes grow heavier, lulled by food and warmth, you notice a young girl curling up against a robe-clad grandmother in the corner, both dozing gently as the low murmur of conversation flows around them. A cat, yes, a bathhouse cat, slinks under a bench, tail high, looking for unattended sausages. You recline a little deeper into your seat, letting your head tilt back against the stone. The steam curls up, the candlelight wavers, and Martin, the fishmonger's friend, begins softly humming a tune that sounds like something from the sea. You won't remember what you ate exactly, but you'll remember how you felt, like you belonged in the warm belly of some friendly stone giant, cradled in laughter and rosemary and the murmur of other people's joy. You rise again, slowly, content and perhaps slightly bread-heavy, your skin flushed with warmth and your limbs softened from the meal. The bathhouse calls you forward, like a gentle wave pulling you back into its rhythm. The din of the dining alcove fades behind velvet curtains, replaced by the softer symphony of dripping water and echoing footsteps. This time, your feet pad across smooth tiles toward a less crowded wing, a quieter corner reserved not for bathing or feasting, but for a most curious practice: medieval medical treatments. That's right. In many medieval bathhouses, wellness wasn't just a side effect of bathing. It was practically a business model. And tonight, you're about to witness the peculiar, often oddly soothing world of steam-based medicine. The first thing you see is a man lying face down on a padded bench, a towel draped over his lower half, and thin curls of steam wafting from clay jars near his feet. A robed practitioner, somewhere between doctor, apothecary, and enthusiastic amateur, is gently massaging a mixture of olive oil and ground mustard seed into the man's back. "Loosens the humors," the practitioner says with a proud smile. You nod gravely, as one must when faced with mustard-based science. In this section of the bathhouse, the rules of the body follow a different logic. Health isn't a matter of isolated symptoms, it's a full-body, full-spirit endeavor. And bathhouses embraced this view with gusto. One treatment, which you're invited to try, with a wink and a leaf-shaped ladle, involves pouring hot herbal water slowly over your neck while seated on a cedar wood bench. The mix includes mint, chamomile, and what smells suspiciously like elderflower. It's meant to soften the spleen, though no one seems entirely sure what a spleen does beyond occasionally needing softening. Historians still argue whether these treatments had any real physiological benefit, or if the mere act of pausing, of being warm, touched, and scented was therapeutic enough in itself. And honestly, after 15 minutes beneath a towel tent, breathing in rosemary vapor, you're not sure you care. You emerge blinking, eyes dewy from the steam, and find yourself in front of a sign painted in fading red ink, "For leeching and cupping, Tuesdays only." Mercifully, it's not Tuesday. Still, cupping therapy is available tonight, and you watch as a practitioner heats small glass cups and places them strategically along a man's spine. The skin rises beneath them like little mountain peaks. He sighs, not in pain, but in the sort of resigned contentment of someone who's been through this routine before and will be again. One woman across the room is having her feet scrubbed with salt and vinegar by another bather. For the melancholia, she explains, too many sad dreams. You make a mental note, in case your own dreams grow too moody. Near a curtained alcove, a quieter ritual takes place, the whispering of ailments. Bathhouse attendants, often trained in rudimentary folk medicine, listen carefully to whispered complaints, stomach grumbles, chest tightness, haunted dreams, and respond with surprisingly specific concoctions. A lemon peel compress here, a garlic poultice there. You're offered a snore cure in the form of a dried lavender sachet to tuck under your robe collar. You try not to take it personally. The integration of medical treatment into bathhouse life wasn't just practical, it was often essential. In cities where physicians were few and literacy lower still, bathhouse staff became informal health advisors. Records show that some bathhouse operators kept ledgers of common ailments and their preferred remedies. One Viennese bathkeeper even claimed to have cured over 200 cases of ghost foot, a mysterious tingling likely caused by nerve compression or imagination, or both. And then, of course, there were the dubious treatments. A man next to you proudly pulls a polished stone from his pouch and dips it into the steam basin, claiming it prevents joint pain. Another rubs his temples with sheep butter, claiming it brings clarity. You nod encouragingly. One bather insists that standing in a cold corner with your eyes closed while humming a hymn can realign your spine. You quietly opt out of that one. The steam-laced air makes every motion slower, more deliberate. Even the medical chatter takes on a hushed, sacred tone. This isn't science as we know it. It's more like communal hope, wrapped in herbs and towels. And just when you think you've seen the strangest of these medieval remedies, someone walks past carrying what appears to be a warm brick wrapped in wool. "Oh," says Martin the fishmonger, reappearing at your elbow, "that's for lower back sorrow. You sit on it and confess your regrets. Brick doesn't judge." You both pause. "Also good for keeping buns warm," he adds. As the evening stretches and the shadows grow long, the treatment room quiets. Most bathers now lie still under blankets, sweating gently, dreaming deeply. The tiled floor beneath your feet radiates warmth like the skin of a sunlit courtyard. You recline on a bench, eyes half-lidded, the scent of mint and thyme lingering in your nose. Somewhere, someone is softly snoring. A bathhouse cat hops onto your legs and makes itself comfortable, its purr vibrating through the wood. It's tempting to laugh at these ancient treatments, to scoff at the mustard rubs and onion tonics. But here, in this steamy cocoon, you begin to understand. It wasn't just about curing sickness. It was about tending to the body with gentleness, attention, and belief. And maybe that belief, that being surrounded by warmth and care could make you feel better, was the most powerful remedy of all.
You stir again, not because you want to, but because a bell somewhere deep in the bathhouse tolls gently, a low, reverberating sound like a bronze yawn. It's not a call to leave, but a reminder that the evening is shifting. Some bathers stretch and sip lemon water, while others disappear behind curtains for something more indulgent still, the pleasure chambers. No, not those kinds of pleasures. Well, not always. Tonight, you're exploring a more nuanced delight. The musical and storytelling rooms tucked away in corners of the bathhouse like secret alcoves in a dream. The stone corridor you enter is dim, lit by wall sconces and patterned lanterns swinging lazily. The air smells of cardamom and beeswax, and the only sound is the faint plucking of a lute. You reach a domed room, its acoustics as rich as the cushions strewn across the floor. A young man sits on a low dais, tuning an oud, his fingers dancing across the strings like dragonflies over water. Around him, a semicircle of guests lean back with half-closed eyes, lulled not just by music, but by the intoxicating rhythm of storytelling. Tonight's tale is about a traveling merchant who fell in love with the ghost of a laundress.
It is, in turns, tragic, ridiculous, and oddly soothing. You join the group and settle in, accepting a small clay cup of warm spiced milk. The storyteller, now mid-tale, paints with his voice. And as she vanished into the steam of the hammam, he realized he'd fallen in love with nothing more than heat and perfume. A soft chuckle rolls through the room. These storytelling sessions weren't mere amusements, they were community glue. In times before printed books were widespread, tales passed by voice were education, cautionary tales, entertainment, and bedtime comfort, all rolled into one. Historians still argue whether the bathhouse storyteller was more priest, gossip, or therapist. What's clear is that the role was honored. In some cities, bathhouse narrators were paid better than scribes. And of course, the stories weren't always romantic or haunted. Some chronicled military campaigns, though with a lot more dramatic flair than factual consistency. Others detailed the lives of saints or beggars, or unlucky bakers whose dough never quite rose again. You listen to one such tale now. A hapless herbalist who accidentally poisoned a goat belonging to the local mayor. To atone, he built an elaborate fountain in the bathhouse, shaped like said goat. The storyteller pauses here for dramatic effect, and sure enough, several guests nod knowingly toward the goat-shaped spout still standing in the courtyard. There's always a moral in these tales, though you suspect it's often added post hoc. Still, they soothe in ways that logic doesn't, and the bathhouse is full of these illogical comforts. In another corner, a musician plays something that might be a dulcimer, or might be an overly ambitious cheese grater. Historians remain divided. The melody is hypnotic, a repetitive cascade that blends with the drip of the fountains and the occasional distant cough.
You recline further, the cushions yielding like old friends. Someone next to you snores gently, and no one shushes them. The stories keep flowing. One features a queen who disguised herself as a towel attendant to escape a boring royal dinner. Another recounts a man who believed his bathtub held oracular powers. He'd soak for hours, waiting for the porcelain to whisper the name of his future bride. Spoiler, the bathtub only ever whispered, "You need more soap." By now, you're so relaxed you nearly miss the change in music. An older woman has taken up a reed flute, and its sound is so soft it barely exists. The room hushes further, breath sinking with the mellow notes. And then comes a new tradition, call and response poetry. A chant leader begins a slow, rhythmic verse, and those still awake murmur the ending lines. It's mesmerizing, like a lullaby invented by monks who once drank too much rosewater. This tradition, scholars note, helped many medieval communities navigate grief and change. It was a way of remembering the dead, processing losses, or even gently mocking your neighbors in verse form. One favorite refrain, you learn, translates roughly to, "May your soup never cool and your donkey never lie." The lights dim further. The firelight glows orange, and shadows dance like slow creatures on the stone walls. You begin to drift, only half listening as the final tale of the night begins. A nobleman who snuck into the bathhouse dressed as a monk, only to be recognized by his peculiar giggle. The punchline? He was sentenced to scrub tiles for a month, during which he discovered a love for grout work and changed careers entirely. You chuckle under your breath. Bathhouses weren't just about heat and water and hygiene. They were about storytelling as social balm. You didn't just cleanse your body here, you reset your soul with laughter and shared memory. The music fades out. The final story ends not with applause, but with a soft sigh from the audience. And just like that, the storyteller bows once and disappears behind a curtain, leaving behind only the scent of frankincense and the memory of words well spoken. You rise slowly, not because you want to leave, but because the next chamber beckons, and the night, like history, always moves forward.
You pad silently down another tiled corridor, your feet bare against the cool mosaic floor. By now, the scents of the bathhouse have layered on you like gentle ghosts: orange blossom from the massage oil, musk from the incense, and maybe, if you're honest, a faint whiff of wet sandalwood from that questionable stool in the steam room. Your next stop is one of the quietest and strangest corners of the medieval bathhouse experience: the nap room. Yes, you heard that right. A room dedicated entirely to sleeping in the middle of communal bathing. Historians still argue whether this room was truly meant for sleep, flirtation, or just a clever way to dodge chores. Either way, it's exactly where you need to be. You slide aside a thick velvet curtain and you're met with darkness, except for a few low oil lamps flickering like sleepy fireflies. The floor is strewn with thick woolen mats, sheepskin throws, and silken bolsters embroidered with names long forgotten. The temperature is perfect, just cool enough to make you burrow a bit, just warm enough to coax a yawn from your bones. A few other bathers are already there, curled into various renditions of fetal pose. One man snores with surprising grace. A woman beside him hums in her sleep. It's a symphony of unconsciousness. You pick a spot beneath an arched niche carved with stars and settle in. The stone wall behind you radiates a faint warmth, either from clever design or the lingering heat of someone else's nap. The medieval nap room wasn't just a novelty. In many parts of the Islamic world and the Byzantine Empire, mid-bath naps were practically sacred. Physicians believed they allowed the body to absorb the benefits of the steam and oils. Sleep, they said, is digestion for the soul. No pressure. In larger cities, some bathhouses even employed a designated nap watcher, someone who'd keep time and gently wake patrons after an hour or two, lest they snooze so long they emerged more raisin than human.
You wonder briefly if anyone ever refused to leave, just melted into the bedding and rebranded themselves as part of the decor. Perhaps that was how the first cushion was invented, just an over-napped poet. Above you, the ceiling curves gently into a dome painted with faded celestial maps. You squint and trace a crooked constellation. Perhaps it's supposed to be Orion, or perhaps it's just a depiction of someone who slipped on soap. Interpretive astronomy, you decide. There's no sound here except the steady drip of a water clock nearby. You watch it for a while. It's like watching time be lazy. Each drop takes its sweet moment to fall, landing in a ceramic bowl with a sound like a whisper clearing its throat. Nap rooms weren't just functional, they were social indicators. The quality of the linens, the softness of the bedding, and whether or not you were offered a pillow stuffed with lavender could all signal your standing in society. One travel diary from 14th century Cairo even lists which bathhouses had napping silks and which used rougher, more philosophical cloths. You assume philosophical meant itchy. But nap rooms could also be egalitarian. The wealthy and the working class alike could share space, wrapped in steam and silence. Here, under this dome, your social rank floats away with the incense smoke. You are not your title, your taxes, or your tunic. You're just someone whose bathwater is still drying behind your ears. Someone coughs gently. Someone else murmurs in a language you don't recognize. A young man turns over beside you, hugging a pillow with the desperation of someone who's survived a vigorous scrub earlier. And then, from a small alcove, a servant tiptoes out with a tray of warm milk and dates. You help yourself to one of each, because why not? The milk is spiced with cinnamon and cardamom, and the date tastes like syrup wrapped in velvet. Your eyelids grow heavier. Theories abound as to why bathhouses had nap rooms at all. Some scholars point to medical texts emphasizing rest after exertion. Others think it was simply a good marketing tactic. After all, you'll return to the bath that lets you sleep in silk under painted stars. You can't argue with the logic. There's even evidence that the nap room doubled as a dream recording space. In certain Persian traditions, people believed dreams within sacred spaces had prophetic weight.
Some bathhouses kept journals where visitors could log their dream fragments. A medieval Yelp, but for visions. Saw my dead uncle arguing with a goose. 4 stars. Would dream again. You smile at the thought. Your own dreams are already stirring at the edges of your mind, full of heat and soap bubbles, and perhaps that storyteller's voice trailing after you like incense smoke. The oil lamps burn lower. The water clock drops slow, and you, wrapped in warmth and stories, drift deeper.
You wake, or more accurately, surface, from your nap in the most luxurious way possible, slowly and with no real desire to be anywhere else. The stone beneath you hums with residual warmth, and the air carries the gentle trace of rose and something toasty like baked almonds. Stretching quietly, you rise on stiff elbows and peer around. A few others are still snoozing, their limbs arranged like the world's coziest puppet show. But the nap room's gentle hush is shifting. Somewhere, a soft bell chimes, a mellow cue that it's time to drift once more into the next chamber of this half-dream, half-bathhouse. And now, dear weary bather, it's time to explore a most peculiar ritual: bathhouse snacks. You'd think a place centered on steam, sweat, and slippery floors would be the last place anyone would set up a buffet. But here you are, blinking against the glow of a fire-lit room filled with the comforting aromas of fresh bread, stewed figs, roasted chickpeas, and something mysteriously fragrant involving yogurt. Communal eating in bathhouses was common across many medieval cultures. From Damascus to Dubrovnik, bathhouses weren't just cleansing stations. They were one-stop shops for relaxation, gossip, healing, and yes, well-timed grazing. Historians still argue whether these snacks were more about nutrition or indulgence, but honestly, does it matter when your fingers are wrapped around a warm, honeyed fritter? You shuffle toward a long stone table, where platters are being replenished by cheerful attendants. The setup is informal, no chairs, just scattered cushions and low stools. One tray holds dates stuffed with pine nuts and lightly dusted with cinnamon. Another offers skewers of grilled eggplant glazed with pomegranate molasses. There's a bowl of warm lentils spiced with cumin, and beside it, a little pyramid of apricots stewed until they resemble tiny golden pillows. You take a bit of everything, because, let's face it, you've earned it. Between the boiling room, the scrubbing, the flirtatious goat fountain, and the nap-induced existential revelations, your body has done enough to deserve at least 3 kinds of legumes. One of the attendants offers you a cup of slightly sour yogurt drink, tangy, cool, and just weird enough to feel historical. You sip it while observing the other bathers. A few chat quietly, but most simply chew in contented silence, sharing the kind of wordless bond that can only come from simultaneously being half-naked and freshly exfoliated. And here's the charming part. The food isn't just an afterthought. In many bathhouses, it was as much a part of the experience as the heat or the massage. Certain dishes were believed to aid in recovery after intense sweating, lentils for strength, dried fruit for sweetness, yogurt to cool the blood. Even the humble chickpea was once thought to improve circulation, though that may have been an excuse for seconds. And yes, sometimes food was social theater. In some Persian and Ottoman traditions, elite guests were served on special silver trays with ornate spoons. If your spoon was wooden, well, better luck next dynasty. There's a low table in the corner where an elderly man with wild eyebrows is folding grape leaves with improbable precision. You watch him work, his fingers moving like dancers, tucking the filling into neat bundles. You get the feeling he's done this thousands of times, maybe even in this very room.
You sample one of the grape leaves. It's stuffed with rice, herbs, and just enough lemon to make your jaw tickle. The texture is perfect. Chewy, silky, earthy. You nod solemnly in the man's direction. He doesn't look up, but you suspect he senses your approval. On the wall beside the food table hangs a faded mural. It depicts bathhouse scenes. Women steaming, men playing backgammon, a servant carrying a tray of food, much like the one in front of you now. And in the corner, a cat. No one knows why the cat is there. Scholars have theories, but mostly the cat has become a mascot of sorts, appearing in art across bathhouses from Constantinople to Cairo. You decide you like the idea of a bathhouse cat, sauntering between towels, never damp, always watching. You're offered a final treat, a small square of almond cake, lightly scented with rosewater. It melts on your tongue, both delicate and deeply satisfying. The perfect full stop to your edible interlude. Of course, not all bathhouse food was decadent. In more rustic regions, a bather might have been lucky to find a hunk of stale bread and a boiled egg. But the principle was the same. Bathing, at its core, was communal. And what's more communal than eating with your sleeves rolled up and your toes still wrinkled from a hot soak? A final sip of yogurt drink, a deep breath, and you rise, heart full, belly happier. As you exit the snack room, someone hums behind you. It's a lullaby you remember from the storytelling room earlier. And with that tune twining in your mind like steam curling up a mosaic wall, you make your way into the next moment. Full, rested, and ready for whatever oddity this bathhouse has to offer next.
You leave the snack room with a belly full of warm chickpeas, honeyed figs, and questionable yogurt, your pace now something between a shuffle and a glide. Your limbs are just heavy enough to feel poetic, and your brain, softened by naps and nut-stuffed pastries, welcomes the next room like a sleepy cat settling into sunbeams. The passage opens into a vaulted chamber lit by colored glass windows filtering sunlight into soft jewel tones. Blues like ocean lullabies, greens like quiet forest paths, and reds that glow like embers tucked into silk. And at the center of it all, couches. Lots and lots of couches. Welcome to the lounging salon. This wasn't a mere waiting area. Oh no. In the medieval bathhouse, the lounging salon was the nerve center of social life. Picture a spa crossed with a salon, crossed with a low-stakes town hall meeting, and you're beginning to get the idea. Low divans line the perimeter, each adorned with embroidered cushions, tasseled throws, and the faint indentations of thousands of conversations. A few patrons recline already, sipping tea, wrapped in towels, and engaging in the universal pastime of polite eavesdropping. You flop down onto one such divan with a satisfying whoomph. It sighs beneath you, and you return the favor. In bathhouses from Cairo to Cordoba, these lounging spaces were more than places to cool down. They were hubs for exchanging news, hearing stories, and even making deals. You glance to your left, where two merchants are quietly arguing over the price of saffron while pretending to discuss weather. On your right, a young couple share a low-voiced poem, every few lines punctuated by giggles. Somewhere near the door, an old man is explaining the shape of a fish he once caught using nothing but his hands and, apparently, luck. The bathhouse was, in many ways, the medieval version of a social media feed. You got your gossip, your community updates, your unsolicited advice, and your wildly unverified medical information, all while wearing a towel and sipping herbal tea. Speaking of which, a server offers you a steaming cup. It's slightly bitter, laced with mint, and chased with a candied almond balanced on the saucer. The tea grounds swirl gently at the bottom. Some claim they can read the future in those curls. You squint. Yours seem to predict extreme lounging followed by possible nap. Sounds plausible.
Above you, the ceiling is painted with faded frescoes of mythical gardens. Vines trail across plaster. Birds with golden tails peer down with judgmental amusement. One tiny monkey appears to be sipping from a bath basin, pinky extended. You salute him with your teacup. Lounging culture differed from region to region, of course. In the Ottoman tradition, you might have found storytellers in this very room, reciting epic poems or recounting the latest palace intrigue. In Moorish Spain, musicians occasionally drifted through, plucking lutes or gently drumming on hand-carved tablas. Historians still argue whether this level of entertainment made the bathhouse an extension of royal court culture or simply a clever way to keep people around long enough to buy another round of snacks. You take another sip and watch as a little drama unfold in the corner. Two bathers have discovered they both know a man named Harun, though it's unclear if he's a cousin, a merchant, or just that guy with the massive eyebrows from the fountain room. The argument is conducted in such sleepy tones that even their raised voices sound like lullabies. Behind you, someone plays a soft tune on a reed flute. It snakes through the air, curling around the columns like musical incense. You close your eyes for a moment, letting it wind through your thoughts. The lounging salon was also, of course, the gossip capital of the bathhouse. Here, secrets were swapped with the ease of slipping off a robe. Royal mistresses, merchant shipwrecks, tax scandals, missing goats, if it mattered, it was whispered here. One medieval account from Fez tells of a lounge so infamous for gossip that people would sneak in just to hear the latest scandal. Another from Aleppo mentions bathhouses as unofficial matchmaking zones, where mothers casually brought up their daughters' talents while serving dates and tea. You imagine the coded language. She's excellent with embroidery probably meant she can survive a 3-hour steam session without fainting. Still reclining, you stretch one leg lazily. The divan creaks in solidarity. You're fairly certain you've lost all concept of time. Judging by the angle of sunlight through the stained glass, it might be late afternoon, or maybe morning again. Maybe you've looped back. In one corner of the salon, there's a tiny bookshelf built into the wall. On its shelves sit a few worn scrolls, some hand-bound codices, and a clay jar filled with pens and ink. Yes, even in bathhouses, literacy sometimes got its moment. A few curious patrons jot down verses, sketches, or perhaps just "I was here" in 3 different alphabets. You run your fingers along the shelf, pulling out a slim volume whose title translates loosely as "On the Benefits of Olive Oil When Applied Liberally and Often." You chuckle, then flip it open. The illustrations inside are adorable. Stick figure bathers in various poses, many of whom appear unnaturally oily. A favorite among the staff, you suspect. And so you lounge, you sip, you people watch. The hum of voices and the scent of mint tea form a cozy cocoon. You're not in a hurry. No one here is. In this salon, wrapped in linen and leisure, you are ageless, statusless, and gloriously unconcerned with anything outside these walls. You've entered a timeless rhythm. Bathe, rest, snack, lounge, repeat. And frankly, you could do this forever.
Eventually, though time has no real authority here, you rise from the divan, every limb reluctantly unfolding like a cat stretching after an especially self-satisfied nap. The salon has done its job, and you are now approximately 78% puddle. But duty, or perhaps curiosity, calls. You pad down a quieter corridor where the chatter fades and the architecture shifts from ornate to almost monastic. The air changes too, drier now, and scented faintly with something unfamiliar. Salt, smoke, and a hint of vinegar? You've entered the exfoliation chamber. Now don't panic. This isn't the kind of modern exfoliation involving terrifying machines and jargon like microdermabrasion. No lasers here. Just a few humble tools and some deeply committed scrubbing. A wide sunken bench lines the room, tiled in matte earth tones and gently warmed from below. Beside it, rows of clay pots and copper trays contain mysterious pastes and powders. Crushed apricot pits, dried milk curds, volcanic ash, powdered walnut shells, and what looks suspiciously like coarse sea salt. A basin nearby bubbles faintly, its water thickened with aromatic herbs. A cheerful attendant greets you with a nod. He's holding what can only be described as a medieval loofah, a loop of horsehair worn smooth from years of enthusiastic use. His grin is friendly, but there's a twinkle in his eye that says, "You're about to lose some skin cells, friend." You lie back, and the ritual begins. It's oddly satisfying. There's rhythm to it. Circular strokes, warm rinses, a slap of rosemary-scented water, then more scrubbing. Not painful, but vigorous. The kind of clean that feels like it might scrub off your regrets. Exfoliation, you realize, wasn't just cosmetic.
Across many medieval cultures, it had spiritual and medical weight. In Islamic bathhouse tradition, removing dead skin was also seen as removing spiritual impurities. In Byzantine customs, exfoliation was part of preparing for major religious observances. And in 13th century Persia, texts describe exfoliating treatments as a balm for melancholy. Clearly, they understood the joy of a good scrub. Historians still argue whether exfoliation in communal settings served more as medical therapy or religious purification. But one thing is clear: it was a ritual embraced across class, creed, and culture. Of course, not all exfoliants were created equal. In Japanese sentos, rice bran was often used. The ancient Egyptians favored natron and pumice. Romans, sand and oil, because why not end your bath gritty and greasy? Here in this chamber, though, you're being treated to the Andalusian method, a paste of olive oil, ash, and crushed lavender buds. It smells like a meadow collided with a fireplace, and somehow it works. Between scrubbing passes, the attendant hums a little tune, a lullaby perhaps, or just something to pass the time. You consider joining in, but your mouth is currently occupied with not blurting "ow" every time he hits a ticklish spot. As your skin begins to pinken, in the most flattering spa commercial way possible, he gestures to another pot, this one filled with what appears to be clay. He dips his fingers in and gently applies it to your face, forming a mask that dries into a matte, crusty monument to relaxation. There's something undeniably bonding about this whole process. In many medieval cultures, exfoliation wasn't a private activity but a shared one. Friends scrubbed each other's backs. Strangers offered exfoliation advice like it was common small talk. In some Moroccan bathhouses, women still practice traditional ghusl clay masks together, an activity as social as it is soothing. Once your mask sets, it's rinsed off with a copper ladle of rose water. It smells like the perfume aisle at an herb garden. You resist the urge to lick your cheek, barely. And just like that, it's over. You sit up and your skin feels like it's been upgraded, smooth, fresh, slightly tingly, like someone took your outer self and buffed it to a polite gleam. The attendant bows and points toward the next door, clearly satisfied with his handiwork. You nod back, glowing in the way only someone who's been gently sanded like fine furniture can glow. Before you leave, you catch a glimpse of a shelf lined with tiny scrolls, each one, apparently, a collection of exfoliation recipes passed down through generations. Some are surprisingly poetic, bearing names like "The Breeze That Wakes the Skin" or "A Recipe for Polishing Sorrows Away." You imagine someone long ago scribbling out these mixtures by lantern light, absolutely convinced they'd unlocked the secrets to both beauty and enlightenment. You pocket a mental note to try one later, perhaps the one involving fermented goat's milk and lilac dust. You never know. And so you move forward, skin humming, cheeks flushed, senses slightly sharpened. You've been scraped, masked, rinsed, and possibly improved. Maybe even spiritually exfoliated, if that's a thing. Next stop, something involving scented oil and dangerously fluffy towels, you hope. You follow the gently curved corridor, its walls now tiled in soft pinks and muted golds, until you reach a doorway framed by a hanging veil of silk. It sways lightly in the bathhouse air, as if beckoning you inward with the breezy indifference of someone who knows they smell fantastic. Beyond it, the anointing room. Now, this part is where the bathhouse starts to feel less like hygiene and more like royalty cosplay. You enter slowly, your freshly exfoliated skin tingling with anticipation, or perhaps a faint lingering sting. The room is dim but warm, glowing from a cluster of glass lanterns suspended at varying heights. A low bench awaits you, padded with woven cotton and draped with linen sheets that look aggressively soft. Arrayed nearby on a wooden tray are bottles and flasks of every conceivable shape, all filled with oils tinted the colors of ripe fruit, pale nectar, and desert sunrise. Some are thick and heavy, others nearly vaporous. All of them seem to shimmer. A woman approaches with practiced grace, hands glistening with oil, smiling the way someone might if they knew they were about to turn you into a glazed pastry. She gestures for you to recline. The anointing begins. Warm oil trickles across your shoulder blades first, then down the arms. Smooth, steady movements, as if your body were a map she's learning by touch. The scent is subtle at first, cardamom and orange blossom, then jasmine, then something woody. You're not entirely sure where the oils begin and end, but you are sure that your soul just took off its shoes. Anointing with oil wasn't just about smelling good, though that was a considerable bonus. In medieval times, oils were used to protect the skin from wind, sun, and dryness, especially in arid regions like Andalusia or the Levant. But they also carried symbolism. In Christian Europe, oil was holy. It sealed kings and saints. In Islamic tradition, perfuming the body before prayer was considered both respectful and spiritually cleansing. And in many Indian and Chinese rituals, scented oils were used to balance internal energies. Historians still debate whether anointing in public bathhouses was more medicinal or ceremonial in intent. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, slippery and well-scented. As the oil seeps into your skin, so does the sensation of release, of tension abandoning your muscles, of time curling up for a nap in the corner. There's something oddly intimate about being oiled in silence. The bathhouse attendant never speaks, never rushes. She moves like someone practicing a sacred rite. You feel less like a client, more like a particularly agreeable statue being lovingly preserved.
Of course, oils varied wildly by region. In Egypt, castor oil and moringa were prized. In North Africa, argan oil was already being used centuries before it exploded onto the shelves of 21st century hair salons. The Byzantines loved spiced olive oil. And in medieval Japan, camellia oil was the luxury standard. Apparently, if it had a pleasant smell and didn't poison you, someone tried rubbing it on their body. She moves to your scalp now, fingers working oil into your hairline with the patience of a cat grooming its kitten. Your eyes close involuntarily. There's a story, possibly apocryphal, about a 14th century Turkish sultan who refused to make decisions unless he'd been anointed first. His advisors supposedly kept a travel pouch of oil for on-the-spot diplomatic emergencies. Whether that's true or not, you can understand the sentiment. Everything feels more manageable when your temples are slicked with neroli. The oiling continues. Legs, hands, even the soles of your feet. You haven't been this thoroughly moisturized since you fell into that vat of goat butter in section 7. Don't worry, we remember. There's a rhythm to it all, a sensual choreography that feels both timeless and personal. On a nearby shelf sits a small bowl of attar, rose essence so concentrated it smells like a poem. The attendant dabs a trace behind your ears. It's enough to make your spine sigh. You lie still for a while, basking. The oil doesn't feel greasy anymore. It's merged with your skin, made peace with your pores. You suspect you could slide down a hallway without moving a muscle. You also suspect you could sleep for about a week. In some cultures, especially in medieval Persia and Mughal India, this moment would be followed by poetry or music. Soft lute melodies, recited verses about the beauty of the oiled body, metaphors involving dewdrops and moonlight. Sadly, this bathhouse doesn't come with a live bard, but you do imagine someone murmuring a couplet from Hafiz or Rumi just out of sight. You are not a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop. Cheesy? Maybe, but in this moment, slick and blissed out, it works. Eventually, the attendant pats you dry with a cloth so soft it should be illegal. She gives you one final smile, equal parts farewell and please don't ruin this glow by touching anything dirty, and disappears through a side door. You rise slowly, like a freshly anointed deity. You smell like a spice market and a flower garden had a baby. You are now approximately 92% serenity. The next room awaits.
You step into the next room and immediately your senses shift gears. Gone is the sensual warmth of oil and jasmine. Now it's all about air, crisp, cool, and dry. Welcome to the cooling chamber, the Bathhouse's version of a gentle reboot before re-entering the chaos of the world outside. The room is vast and quiet, with pale stone benches arranged in semicircles, each one tucked behind a screen of gauze or carved wood latticework. The lighting is subdued, a few flickering oil lamps casting long shadows like sleepy dancers. You find a spot near a low fountain where water trickles slowly from a copper spout into a shallow marble basin. The sound is hypnotic, like a whisper that forgot what it was saying. You sit, swaddled in a clean linen wrap, your skin still dewy from oil, your limbs soft as cooked noodles. Around you, others rest in silence, sipping cool infusions or just staring into the middle distance with the vacant satisfaction of people who've truly peaked. Now, this wasn't just a place to rest, it was a transition zone. Medieval bathhouse culture was surprisingly sophisticated in how it managed temperature changes. The logic was simple. You couldn't just go from scalding steam to chilly streets without risking a violent argument with your immune system. So you cooled down gradually, letting your body adjust, your pores close, your heartbeat slow. Basically, the cooling room was the medieval version of a post-yoga corpse pose. You breathe in. The air smells faintly of mint and citrus. Someone nearby must be sipping a medieval sports drink. Refreshing liquids were often served here. Sherbets in the Islamic world, barley water in Europe, even light wines in some of the more permissive bathhouses. One record from 14th century Cairo mentions rose-flavored iced drinks served in chilled metal cups, a far cry from the lukewarm tap water you get at modern spas, right? Historians still debate whether these drinks were primarily medicinal or just delightfully extra. Many were laced with herbs thought to cool the blood, basil, coriander, violet leaf. And some recipes survive in old pharmacopoeias, tucked between ointments for gout and recipes for lead eyeliner. Don't try that one. A servant drifts by, offering a small bowl of crushed ice with lemon and a sprig of thyme. You accept it gratefully, pressing the cold metal against your palm. You're not sure whether this counts as hydration or dessert, but either way, you feel vaguely royal.
Let's talk fashion, because what people wore in these post-bathing moments was surprisingly telling. In many cultures, bathhouses issued light robes or wraps, often embroidered or subtly dyed to indicate social rank. Wealthy patrons might wear linen robes edged with silk. The very wealthy ones could be spotted in fabrics imported from China or dyed with indigo from West Africa. In Istanbul, bathhouse attendants were known for their gorgeous towels, woven with colored stripes and sometimes gifted to favored clients, like bathhouse party favors. You recline slightly, and for a moment, the only sound is that trickling fountain and the occasional whisper of feet on stone. Your pulse has slowed. The ambient noises of the world, the creaks and birds and market sounds outside, seem to have been banished to a different planet. There's a funny old traveler's account from the 16th century, an English merchant visiting a Turkish hammam. He wrote that the cooling room was so peaceful he fell asleep and missed his caravan by 2 days. He blamed it on the rosewater and opium-laced sweetmeats. That's one way to extend your vacation. You stretch your toes. It's the kind of movement that feels both unnecessary and luxurious. The stone bench beneath you is still faintly warm, absorbing and giving back just enough heat to remind you that time is moving, albeit very slowly. It's in places like this, quiet corners of public relaxation, that philosophical thoughts tend to sneak in. No one's saying you'll invent calculus while sipping lemon ice in a cooling room, but don't be surprised if you start contemplating your place in the cosmos or what it would feel like to reincarnate as a cloud. Your eyes drift closed. You're not asleep, just somewhere between blink and dream. There's a school of thought among some modern historians that bathhouses were the original third spaces, neither work nor home, but essential gathering spots. This cooling room, in particular, was where conversations happened. Quiet ones about philosophy, politics, poetry, or that weird thing someone saw in the steam chamber. In some regions, business deals were brokered here. In others, clandestine romances bloomed over lemon water and stolen glances. A soft chuckle bubbles up from a corner, where two friends are clearly trying not to disturb the peace, and failing gently. It adds to the ambiance. Nothing loud, nothing sharp, just human presence, calibrated to barely there. You lean back, letting your head rest against the stone wall. The coolness seeps into your scalp. You imagine your thoughts gently filing themselves into neat rows. Somewhere in the background, someone yawns in a way that's contagious. Even now, the faintest touch of oil clings to your wrists, perfumed and warm. You breathe in and out. Even your exhale feels moisturized. There's no rush. The outside world, the donkeys, the market haggling, the unpredictable plumbing of 14th century street fountains can wait. Right now, you exist entirely in a room designed for nothing except the graceful passage of time. You sip the last of your crushed lemon ice. The mint lingers. And just like that, you're ready for the final stages of the bathhouse journey.
You rise slowly from the cooling room bench, your limbs supple, your breath steady, and your mind somewhere between enlightened and delightfully blank. The final leg of your bathhouse journey awaits. Not a frantic exit, but a closing ritual, the graceful return to the outer world. The transition is marked not by a jarring door slam or a brisk towel off, but by an entire room dedicated to dressing and grooming. Yes, it's the dressing chamber, the place where the art of putting yourself back together is almost as ceremonial as the bathing itself. You step through a curtain into a space filled with golden light filtering through high windows. The walls are lined with carved wooden lockers and low benches padded with cushions. It smells like cedar, lavender, and, if your nose is keen, a trace of beeswax from freshly polished floors. An attendant approaches, bearing a neatly folded bundle of your clothing, freshly scented and slightly warmed. You could get used to this. As you ease into your garments, you realize they somehow feel softer than before, as if the fabric itself had taken a bath. You don't dress quickly. No one does. This is part of the unwinding. A mirror, slightly warped but still useful, reflects your image, rosy-cheeked, glossy-skinned, hair slightly wild in a way that says, I just spent 2 hours in self-care bliss and you cannot ruin my vibe. You take a moment to admire yourself, not in vanity, but in gratitude. You're alive, clean, and glowing like a well-fed cat. In many historical bathhouses, this dressing space was also where the final touches of grooming occurred. Combs carved from horn or ivory were available, as were small dishes of scented powder. In Baghdad's grand bathhouses, patrons could choose from a variety of hair oils, sesame, almond, even saffron infused. In Japan, bathers applied camellia oil to keep hair smooth and skin luminous. And yes, eyebrows. Let's talk about them. In several medieval cultures, eyebrow grooming was non-negotiable. In the Islamic world, shaping them was part of tahara, ritual cleanliness. In Ming China, refined courtiers painted theirs in elaborate curves. In Elizabethan England, people plucked them into near oblivion to better show off foreheads, which were apparently the sexy metatarsals of the Renaissance. Here, in your imaginary bathhouse dressing room, there's no pressure, just options. Maybe you dab a little rose water behind your ears. Maybe you admire your eyebrows and let them be their glorious, untamed selves. Either way, you're present. Historians still argue whether this final room functioned more as a vanity space or a social forum. In many bathhouse cultures, the dressing room was where gossip reached its peak. You'd hear about upcoming festivals, whispered love affairs, or the local baker's scandalous attempt at raisin bread. Even in silence, the air buzzed with gentle social electricity. You sit on the bench for a moment longer, watching the way sunlight dances on the polished floor. A pair of bathhouse attendants pass by, chatting softly in a dialect you don't quite recognize. Their tone is warm, almost conspiratorial, like people who know they work at the happiest place in town.
And really, they do. In an age before phones, before pharmacies, before therapy apps and yoga studios, the bathhouse was where people came to feel human again. That's no small thing. You begin to gather your things. A small pouch of herbs, gifted by an attendant who says it helps ward off flies and bad nudes. A tiny clay pot of balm for dry lips and windburn. These aren't parting gifts, really. They're reminders. Tokens to extend the glow just a little longer once you're back among the noise and dust. Outside, you can hear the muffled sounds of life returning. Horses clop by. Someone sings a folk tune off-key. A vendor yells about apricots with such passion you briefly consider becoming a fruit merchant. But for now, you're not quite ready to re-enter. So you linger. A few other patrons are doing the same. One is carefully knotting a scarf in front of a mirror. Another is sketching something in the margin of a worn notebook, perhaps the poem they composed while steaming. Inspiration and perspiration go hand in hand, apparently. You give one last stretch, a full-body sigh that feels like punctuation. The kind of sigh that says, I came, I soaked, I conquered. Then you walk toward the outer door. There's a final tray on a small pedestal, holding offerings for the road. A sprig of myrtle for good scent. A sliver of candied ginger for the palate. A single dried fig wrapped in paper. A literal sweet ending. You take one. Of course you do. As you pull open the door, warm sunlight spills in. The world hasn't changed, but you have. Slightly, softly, sufficiently. This was never just about bathing. It was about transformation. And as you step out into the gentle chaos of medieval city life, where chickens strut beside wheelbarrows and perfumed lords haggle over turnips, you carry with you a quiet, fragrant sense of having been thoroughly, splendidly restored.
Outside the bathhouse, the streets feel different. The air hasn't changed, but you have. Your senses are sharpened yet softened, a paradox that only makes sense once you've been steamed, scrubbed, and stroked into serenity. Every cobblestone seems smoother, every passing voice more melodic, every pigeon slightly less annoying. You move with a certain dignity now, not haughty, but deliberate, like someone who has recently achieved something monumental, even if that something was just not fainting in the hot room. You're clean, inside and out. In most medieval cities, bathhouses weren't isolated temples of hygiene. They were stitched right into the fabric of daily life. You'd often find one nestled beside a bakery, convenient, or near a mosque or cathedral, symbolic. In some cases, bathhouses were integrated into caravanserais, so traveling merchants could scrub away road dust before re-entering polite society, or, eating soup without their beard falling off in flakes. What you may not expect, however, is how many people viewed the bathhouse not as a destination, but as part of a ritual loop, a kind of urban dance. You bathe, you rest, and then you do something important, a meeting, a market, a marriage. Bathing was the reset button for life's major and minor events. Take Cairo in the 12th century. Bathhouses there were so beloved that brides would make a symbolic pre-wedding visit, sometimes accompanied by their entire female entourage. Think of it like a medieval bachelorette party, but with fewer cocktails and more lemon-scented loofahs. In Japan, the custom of communal bathing with one's family meant that cleanliness wasn't just about skin. It was about intimacy, trust, and shared silences. In fact, some bathhouses even developed reputations as matchmaking hubs. People weren't exactly flirting mid-scrub, but proximity bred familiarity, and familiarity sometimes turned into affection. You have a lovely rinsing technique, might have been the ancient equivalent of a swipe right. Of course, things could get complex. In some Ottoman cities, bathhouses were among the few spaces where women could gather outside the home with a semblance of freedom. That made them vibrant centers of female life, social, economic, even political. There are stories of bathhouse attendants passing messages between households, carrying news, gossip, and even warnings. Your shampoo girl? She might have also been your town's secret whisper network. Historians still debate how much influence these bathhouse women wielded. Were they simply passive gossip carriers or active participants in shaping the social fabric? The evidence is tantalizing, but slippery, much like the marble floors of their domain.
And let's not forget the scent trail you leave behind. If you've just come from a bathhouse, you smell distinct. Herbal, floral, maybe even citrusy. It's a walking signal. I've just been purified. In a world where personal hygiene was often the exception, not the rule, this scent was currency. It made you welcome in shops, temples, and social circles. It may have even improved your bargaining power at the fish market. But being freshly bathed also carried risks. In cooler climates, say Paris in winter, you were told to cover your head tightly upon exiting the bath, lest the cold air sneak in and mess with your humors. Some physicians swore that walking barefoot post-bath would invite death via the soles. Others said if you looked at the moon too soon after bathing, you could go mad. As with many things in history, bathing was both sacred and slightly cursed. Still, you walk on. Past a spice seller scooping cardamom with gold-rimmed fingers. Past a street performer balancing a stick on his nose while singing a ballad about a chicken that stole a ring. Past the town scribe, hunched over his desk, pen twitching with the news of the day. You feel apart from them, but not separate. Like a character in a story who knows they've just exited one scene and are gently transitioning into the next. Maybe you're heading home, or to a cafe where friends are waiting. Or maybe you're just wandering a bit, letting the bathhouse's echo linger in your bones. You pass someone headed the opposite way, still dusty, shoulders tight, eyes squinting from the sun. They glance at you, then double-take slightly, as if thinking, why does that person look like they've just discovered inner peace and possibly fig-scented enlightenment? You give them a small nod, the secret smile of the recently steamed. A group of children darts by, chasing a dog that seems to be chasing its own tail. You sidestep them with the ease of a reed in water. You're not tense, you're not rushed. You are, in every sense, post-bath. One of your sandals makes a soft clicking noise with each step, and it becomes a little metronome in your head. Click, clean, click, calm, click, clarified. In a few hours, the spell might fade. You'll spill soup on yourself. You'll argue with your cousin about taxes. You'll stub your toe on a chamber pot someone left too close to the door. But for now, you're still floating. And you begin to wonder, what if life could always be just a bit more bathhouse?
You find yourself back in the rhythm of the city, but the echoes of the bathhouse stay with you. Your skin hums faintly with warmth, and the faint scent of herbs still lingers beneath your collar. As you pass an open window, you hear laughter from within, a family sharing a meal, clattering bowls, a child shrieking with glee at some joke you can't quite catch. Somehow, it all feels more vibrant now. But let's take a moment to zoom out. For all their steamy allure, bathhouses were also deeply pragmatic institutions, part of a wider infrastructure that managed urban life. And in medieval cities, where sewer systems were, let's say, improvised, having dedicated spaces for large-scale washing actually helped keep disease at bay. Kind of like a sponge mop against the tide of bubonic plague. Not perfect, but not useless either. Now, you may be wondering, who kept these places running? Who heated the water, scrubbed the floors, drained the pools, and whispered, "Please don't eat your figs in the steam room"? Behind every marble bench and every pail of rosewater, there were real, hard-working humans, part tradespeople, part magicians. In Baghdad during the Abbasid Golden Age, bathhouse staff included the muqayyis, or the one who measured temperature and mixed the hot and cold waters just so. A single miscalculation, and you'd either roast a nobleman or freeze a caliph's toes. Not great for job security. There were also masseurs, barbers, towel boys, perfumers, and the keeper of the oils, who was essentially the medieval equivalent of a high-end spa product consultant. The hierarchy of bathhouse labor was surprisingly sophisticated. In larger facilities, apprentices might spend years learning the art of pouring water in precisely the right way. Some elders even claimed that the angle of the pour could reveal your personality. Oh, you splash from the left side first? That's very melancholic of you.
In parts of Central Asia, bathhouses were often family businesses passed down through generations. There are records of daughters taking over from fathers, sons inheriting from mothers, and siblings running rival bathhouses across the same street, possibly throwing limes at each other in moments of petty vengeance. But the labor wasn't always so picturesque. In colder climates, heating the water involved lugging heavy loads of firewood and maintaining enormous furnaces, often in poorly ventilated spaces. Some workers suffered chronic respiratory problems, and burns were sadly part of the job. Imagine spending your entire day warming water so strangers could nap in eucalyptus-scented bliss while your eyebrows smoldered off in the boiler room. Historians still argue whether bathhouse laborers were respected artisans or seen more as glorified janitors. The answer, predictably, depends on the time, place, and clientele. In posher circles, the best attendants were prized, given gifts, tips, and sometimes lifelong patronage. In other towns, they were invisible, fading into the mist with barely a thank you.
Even stranger, in some regions, bathhouse staff developed a kind of unspoken code of conduct, a mixture of etiquette and superstition. For instance, in parts of the Balkans, it was believed bad luck would follow any bathhouse where the floors weren't washed in silence at dawn. In Sicily, it was whispered that certain oils must never be poured in shadow or they'd turn sour and attract jealous spirits. Do these tales have a basis in reality? Maybe not, but they tell us something real about the emotional weight these spaces carried. You pass a woman at a fountain now, drawing water into a brass jug. Her sleeves are rolled up, and she smiles when she sees you. Not because she knows you, not because you're especially charming today, though let's be honest, your skin is glowing. It's the smile of shared understanding. You've been to the bathhouse, and that puts you both in a rarefied, pleasantly pruny club. You nod back, and for a moment the entire world slows. The donkey carts seem quieter. The market calls dim to a murmur. You are, somehow, in sync with everything. A small boy runs by with a bundle of clean towels over his shoulder, perhaps bound for one of the nearby hammams. He's whistling. He probably has no idea that he's part of a centuries-old chain of hygiene and hospitality, but there it is, history in motion in miniature. You think, too, of those whose labor made your bath possible, the ones who filled the copper basins, stirred the oils, wrung the cloths. Not glamorous jobs, not headline material, but essential. And though they're gone now, their handiwork still echoes in every steamy sigh, in every quiet exhale after a scrub. You adjust your robe slightly. The breeze is picking up. Somewhere nearby, someone is stoking a fire beneath a bathhouse floor, readying it for the evening rush. Somewhere else, a tired apprentice is draining a pool by hand, cursing the stubbornness of medieval plumbing. And somewhere very far away, maybe even centuries from now, someone will study this exact bathhouse, this precise practice, and try to imagine what it felt like to walk through the city, clean and calm, heart light as a towel drying in the sun. You don't need to imagine, you're living it.
You take a slow turn down a quieter street now. One of those narrow medieval alleys, barely wide enough for two goats to pass without negotiating. The sun has dipped lower, and warm golden light spills across the cobblestones like melted butter. Somewhere behind you, the bathhouse fades from view, but the memory of steam and sandalwood clings pleasantly to your skin. Tonight, you're not the only one walking home freshly scrubbed. Around you, you notice others with damp hair, flushed cheeks, and that floaty post-bath serenity that makes even grumpy monks smile at pigeons. This communal exhale is no coincidence. Bathhouses didn't just clean bodies. They scrubbed away stress, suspicions, and sometimes entire afternoons. Which brings us to a curious side effect of all this bathing, the unofficial etiquette of post-bath behavior. Imagine yourself, towel draped over one shoulder, gliding into the street like a bar of soap that grew legs. The rulebook is mostly unspoken but clear. Step 1, move slowly, or you'll undo all that delicious relaxation. Step 2, avoid getting dusty too soon, lest your scrub down be in vain.
Step 3. Greet fellow bathers with subtle knowing nods because you've both just stood naked in a room full of strangers and emerged spiritually smoother. But the post-bath walk wasn't just a nice cool-down. In some medieval cities, it was the perfect time for matchmaking. That's right, many a marriage began with a coy glance over freshly rinsed shoulders. In Islamic Spain, it wasn't uncommon for mothers to scope out potential sons or daughters-in-law as they emerged from the hammam, cheeks dewy, hair respectfully damp, not a flake of skin out of place. It's basically the original dating app, but with steam and sandals.
In Japan, particularly in Edo period communal baths, the post-bath stroll was practically ritualized. You'd put on your yukata, perhaps grab a cup of barley tea, and wander the streets with friends or family. Some bathhouses even had adjoining tea houses where people gathered to chat, listen to music, or just sit in silence, letting their pores bask in the afterglow. The bath wasn't the end of the experience, it was the gentle beginning of your night. And then there's the food. Historians still argue whether post-bath snacks were part of official bathhouse services or just an inevitable side hustle. But what we do know is this: people got hungry. After sweating out half your body's salt content, you could smell grilled meat from 2 villages away. Vendors quickly caught on. In Istanbul, roasted chestnuts and honey-soaked pastries became standard fare outside major hammams. In Korea, you'd get sikye, a sweet rice drink, and perhaps some geranchim, a fluffy egg custard that soothed the soul and replenished electrolytes. Modern sports drinks could never. Of course, not all bathgoers wandered into sunsets and snacks. In colder regions like Northern Europe, especially during long winters, post-bath life involved bundling up fast. You might wrap yourself in layers of wool, clutch a heated stone under your cloak, and dash home before the damp in your hair turns you into an icicle. And in regions where public baths were considered scandalous or were being slowly outlawed by authorities, you had to be discreet. There are records from Puritan New England suggesting that those who emerged too relaxed were viewed with suspicion. You're smiling, Thomas. Were you boiling yourself in pleasure? Gasp! The scandal! In time, the post-bath walk would evolve or disappear. The rise of private bathing changed things. You couldn't exactly saunter around your living room in a towel hoping to bump into your crush anymore. And while spas today still offer robes and cucumber water, it's not quite the same as stepping into a cobbled lane, feet still warm from the tile floor, stomach rumbling for dates and almonds. But let's pause here, because something curious happens during this walk. You start to notice smells differently. The scent of baking bread seems more divine than before. The jasmine creeping up the walls, positively flirtatious. Even the manure piles feel tolerable. It's not just the absence of your own funk, it's that your senses have been rinsed too. The bathhouse didn't just exfoliate your skin, it exfoliated your worldview. And speaking of exfoliation, let's return to a favorite topic: tools. One curious ritual was the post-bath inspection. People would proudly compare loofahs, pumice stones, and kesa mitts. In some towns, owning an elaborately embroidered exfoliating glove was a major flex, like flashing your newest tech gadget today. One traveler to Damascus noted that men displayed their bath brushes like trophies at dinner parties. Oh, this? Goat hair, my friend. Imported. 2 silvers a strand. Somehow, here, on this gentle walk home, you've become part of something ancient. You're not just clean, you're reconnected. With the city, with the smells, with strangers who now feel like co-conspirators in some steamy secret. As the bathhouse disappears entirely behind you, replaced by low-lit homes and the sounds of evening prayers, you catch yourself smiling for no reason. Maybe it's the endorphins, maybe it's the honey pastry in your hand, or maybe it's the quiet thrill of knowing you've walked the same post-bath path as silk traders, scholars, bakers, poets, and lovers before you. And if someone passes you and gives you a knowing nod, you'll nod back, because you know exactly what they've just come from.
The next morning drips in slowly, like honey from a tilted spoon. You wake in a simple wooden bed. Mattress stuffed with straw or wool depending on the region and your budget, wrapped in linen sheets faintly scented with lavender or smoke. Your skin still hums faintly from yesterday's scrub. The memory of warm stone and eucalyptus oil clings faintly, even as the clamor of a waking city begins outside. But before you face another day of bartering, baking, or bookkeeping, there's one last ritual to consider: the aftermath. Because while the bathhouse may have closed its doors for the night, the effects linger. On your body, yes, but more curiously, in the rhythm of society. Today, we're looking at the afterlife of a single visit to the medieval bathhouse. Not ghosts and ghouls, but the more delicate echoes, changes in routine, social ripple effects, and the occasionally suspicious side-eye from certain authorities who thought maybe, just maybe, you were getting too clean. You stretch, swing your legs out of bed, and yawn. And then you scratch your arm. Not out of discomfort, but because your skin is so smooth, it feels almost alien. Across many cultures, that post-bath softness was almost sacred. In Japan, there were even little poems, senyo, written about the way water changed one's sense of self. One went something like, "Washed, the farmer dreams of a better man beneath. The dirt was only skin." But here's the flip side. Now that you're clean, you have to stay that way, which means avoiding soot, livestock, drunks in alleyways, and, perhaps most difficult, your own family's kitchen, where the soot from the hearth clings to everything. So, instead of diving into work, some people would designate the day after bathing as a day of relative rest. In 14th century Morocco, letters mention people taking the hammam and staying home, as if they'd caught a spa-induced flu. In practice, it was probably just a clever excuse to lounge around and rehydrate. In more religiously inclined communities, cleanliness wasn't just for comfort, it was spiritual prep. In parts of the Islamic world, you might attend mosque shortly after the bath, feeling not just purified, but perfectly prepped to face God. In Catholic Europe, a Saturday evening bath was a prelude to Sunday Mass. You'd walk in smelling of rosemary and soap, with even the saints nodding in approval. But not everyone loved this sparkling new version of you. Across multiple time periods, authorities worried about overbathing. Yes, just like your grandma who thinks you'll catch a chill if you shower twice a day. There are records from 16th century Spain where moralists warned that too many trips to the bathhouse made people vain, lazy, or weirdly enthusiastic. In some Puritan colonies, regularly washing your body could mark you as suspicious. What have you got to hide, Roger? A guilty conscience or just body odor? Historians still argue whether these complaints came from genuine religious concern or simple jealousy from those who couldn't afford the luxury. Probably a bit of both. Then there's the curious matter of scent. You might assume people returned from the baths smelling universally clean. But clean is culturally relative. In some medieval cultures, musk was prized, even if it came from animals. In others, orange blossom or cedar oil did the trick. The result? A parade of differently fragrant humans, each leaving their own olfactory signature in the street like medieval Mario Kart racers tossing scent trails instead of banana peels.
This, in turn, influenced how people interacted with each other. Merchants claimed to smell quality. If he smells of pine tar, he's been to the cheap bathhouse near the docks. If he smells of jasmine, he's got coin. Women, meanwhile, were sometimes judged on the after-bath linger of rose oil or sandalwood. In Istanbul, there were even hammam-specific perfumes sold by street vendors for those who wanted to cheat the system, skip the bath, spritz on the illusion. It's basically the medieval equivalent of dry shampoo. But the most fascinating part? The memories. Bathhouses weren't just a place to wash your body. They washed away the day itself. That argument you had with your cousin? Steamed out of your pores. The goat that stepped on your foot? Forgotten. That tax you didn't pay? Okay, maybe still looming, but at least you'd smell great when the collector arrived. There's even evidence that people bathed together to heal broken friendships.
In 15th century Italy, records show feuding neighbors invited each other to the stufa, the local steam bath, to talk things out. Look, Marco, I may have insulted your bread, but your loofah technique is flawless. And in some cultures, people shared the bathhouse schedule as a form of diplomacy. We both go Tuesdays. Let's talk over steam. The bath was a neutral ground, no matter your status. Inside the bathhouse, a butcher could float beside a nobleman, and the only thing dividing them was how many towels they could afford to rent. Once out, those lines redrew quickly, but for a brief, slippery moment, everyone was just human. And that's the after effect still lingering as you prepare to dress for the day. You're not just clean, you're recalibrated. A tiny reset button pressed with warm water and eucalyptus-scented soap. Outside, the city stirs. You hear donkeys, bells, children, the sizzling of morning food. You lace up your sandals, or wooden clogs, or straw slippers, careful not to step in the mystery puddle by the door. Your day begins again. But something is different. You're walking a little taller, breathing a bit deeper. Skin just slightly too smooth to ignore. It won't last forever. Dust waits for no one. But for now, you're a freshly bathed citizen of a bathhouse city. And it's going to be a good day.
You move through the city with the grace of someone who's recently had their skin sandblasted with olive oil soap and vigorous gossip. As you dodge a goat cart and sidestep a puddle of questionable origin, you can't help but wonder, who really ran the bathhouses? Ah, now we arrive at the quiet power players, the invisible hands behind the steam. Because while emperors, sultans, and bishops might have dictated laws, the folks running bathhouses influenced everything from neighborhood politics to matchmaking. Let's start with ownership. In Islamic cities like Damascus and Fez, bathhouses were often waqf, religious endowments that supported mosques or schools. That's right, your steam session might have helped fund some kid's education. Congratulations, you philanthropist! In Constantinople, by contrast, many baths were private businesses, often owned by wealthy merchants who saw steam as a solid investment. You can almost imagine the sales pitch. Sure, spices are profitable, but have you seen what a well-placed marble tub can do? Then we get to the managers. In Europe, especially in the late medieval period, bathhouse keepers were usually guild-affiliated tradespeople. Some doubled as barbers or surgeons, which sounds strange until you realize these professions all involved heated water, sharp tools, and an alarming tolerance for nudity. In Japan, the yuya, bathhouse owners, held such cultural sway that samurai sometimes consulted them as informal advisors. Imagine, I need a good swordsmith, and also my scalp is itchy. Help me, wise soapy man. But it was the attendants, those endlessly adaptable, multitasking marvels who truly kept things running. These were your masseurs, water dippers, scrubbers, gossip magnets, and sometimes even musicians. In 13th century Baghdad, elite bathhouses hired lute players to serenade patrons while they toweled off. That's 5-star service right there. In female-only bathhouses, particularly in the Ottoman Empire and North Africa, attendants often acted as informal therapists, matchmakers, and negotiators. If your sister-in-law was being difficult, you might discuss it while having your heels pumiced. She said, "What? Pass the rose water. I need to scream into this towel." And then there were the cooks. Yes, cooks, because some bathhouses, especially in Japan and the Islamic world, doubled as places to eat, chat, and nap. You could get a steam, a back rub, and a lamb stew, all under the same roof. That's not hygiene, that's hospitality. Of course, all this comfort came with rules. Most bathhouses had a strict rotation system. You couldn't just loiter in the hottest room all day like a boiled turnip. Attendants timed your stay, gently nudging you along with comments like, "Time to move along, steam muffin." Okay, probably not those exact words, but you get the idea. There were also codes of conduct. In some Japanese bathhouses, patrons were required to rinse off outside the communal pool, a ritual still practiced today. In medieval Germany, mixed-gender bathhouses had decorum guidelines. No frolicking, no horseplay, and definitely no unsolicited lute solos. Historians still debate whether the gender-mixed settings in parts of medieval Europe encouraged genuine social mobility or simply gave rise to salacious rumors. Probably both. In cities like Nuremberg and Prague, mixed bathing was common, but with strict time slots and expected behavior. Of course, expected behavior and actual behavior didn't always match. One 15th century pamphlet warned that the bathhouse makes lovers of all who enter it. Kind of like Tinder, but with more humidity. Let's not forget money.
The bathhouse economy was a strange little engine all its own. You paid an entry fee, sure, but then came the upsells. Would you like a pumice rub, an herbal wrap, our new pine sap exfoliant? The truly posh even rented extra towels or brought in their own servants. One noblewoman in Cairo reportedly brought 6 attendants, 3 perfumes, and a tray of honeyed almonds because hygiene tastes better with dessert. And that leads us to the class divide. While public bathhouses were designed for the general population, wealthier citizens often had access to private hours, an early version of the VIP experience. In Paris, some bathhouses offered aristocrats-only evenings. Imagine velvet ropes, but made of braided lavender stems. Still, the most beloved bathhouses weren't always the fanciest. They were the ones with the best attendance, the softest light, the fewest drafty corners. In other words, the ones that felt like home. And just like a good home, these spaces created communities. Attendants remembered your preferred temperature. They teased you gently about your calloused feet. They noticed when you looked tired and recommended mint oil for your headache. They were, in a sense, the unlicensed therapists of medieval life. So yes, kings ruled the land, but bathhouse keepers? They ruled the mood. As you stroll through the street, the air thick with frying onions and morning chant, you notice something. The bathhouse down the alley is already open. Steam curls from its roof like a beckoning finger. A familiar attendant spots you and grins. Back again? You nod. Because maybe one day of smooth skin isn't enough. Maybe you need the gossip, the warmth, the quiet slap of sandals on wet tile. Maybe deep down, you just want someone to call you Steam Muffin. And in this city of dirt and dreams, maybe that's more than enough.
You push open the worn cedar door of the bathhouse and step into a puff of steam that instantly fogs your vision and your thoughts. The air smells of linden blossoms, faint sulfur, and someone's forgotten clove-scented sandal. A towel is handed to you without a word. You're a regular now, a bathhouse person. Tonight, though, the atmosphere feels different, a little quieter, a little sadder. Maybe it's the dimming torches, or the way the hot stones don't hiss quite as fiercely. You wrap your towel and wander deeper, into what might be the final golden age of this place. Because here comes the twist. Bathhouses, once the pulsating heart of city life, began to fall out of favor. Why? Well, like most collapses, it was a combo platter of problems, shifting morals, new plumbing, and one particularly testy plague. Let's start with the church. In medieval Europe, a creeping discomfort with nudity began to grow, particularly post-Black Death. Some church leaders, already suspicious of mixed bathing, started associating the whole steamy enterprise with sin. A naked man is halfway to a scandal, as one particularly cranky monk might have put it. Others argued that the moral rot of cities like Paris and Florence was somehow born in those foggy marble rooms. Never mind that people were just trying to scrape the dirt off their shins. As for public health, well, the irony is painful. Bathhouses had long been the place to get clean, physically, emotionally, spiritually. But in the wake of major pandemics, especially the Black Death and later syphilis outbreaks, suspicion grew. What if bathhouses spread disease instead of preventing it? After all, they were humid, crowded, and full of people muttering and sweating together.
Historians still argue whether bathhouses truly contributed to disease transmission or simply made a convenient scapegoat. Either way, by the late 16th century, many bathhouses across Europe were being shuttered, either by decree or by dwindling clientele. The once vibrant bath districts of London and Vienna began to crumble into soggy silence. But don't worry, we're not ending on a cold, soapy note. Because while bathhouses declined in Europe, they thrived elsewhere. In Japan, for example, the Edo period saw a bathhouse renaissance. The Sento culture exploded. New designs included wooden soaking tubs, colorful murals, and community loyalty cards, because even your great-great-grandma loved a good discount. Many Sento became nightly rituals for workers and children alike. Even today, a Sento visit is often more about community than cleanliness. In the Ottoman Empire, bathhouses remained social hubs well into the 19th century. Elaborate wedding preparations, baby showers, and even business deals happened under domed ceilings and between pours of eucalyptus water. There's an 18th century Turkish folktale about a merchant who won a shipyard and proposed marriage, all before his second rinse. Meanwhile, North Africa and the Middle East never fully turned their backs on hammam culture. In cities like Marrakesh, Cairo, and Aleppo, bathhouses retained their spiritual significance. Some included architectural touches like star-shaped ceiling cutouts, designed to align with the constellations and let in gentle, dappled light. It's hard not to feel divine when you're surrounded by celestial geometry and someone scrubbing your shoulders with rose clay.
Even in Victorian England, with all its corseted prudishness, the bathhouse crept back in, just rebranded. Public bath facilities were promoted for the working class, framed as moral duty rather than luxury. You could almost hear Queen Victoria muttering, "Yes, scrub, but scrub humbly." And then came the pipes. Indoor plumbing revolutionized personal hygiene, but it also spelled doom for many traditional bathhouses. When people could bathe at home, privately, quickly, with fewer foot fungi involved, why would they return to the communal pool? Bathhouses limped along, evolving into spas, health retreats, and novelty attractions. Some morphed into massage parlors. Others, sadly, became less wholesome establishments. By the 20th century, the ancient and noble art of communal bathing had mostly faded into memory or into tourist brochures. But some survived. In Budapest, thermal baths still burble beneath stone colonnades. In Seoul, the Jimjilbang thrives with its sauna rooms, snack bars, and oddly competitive scrub-downs. In rural Morocco, grandmothers still lead granddaughters through the rituals of the hammam, scrubbing, storytelling, and quiet pride in being part of something older than empire. And in Istanbul, some bathhouses remain almost exactly as they were in the 1500s, arched, tiled, and echoing with the gentle splash of a copper bowl against polished stone. You sit now in one such room. Your skin is pink from steam, your eyelids drooping. Somewhere nearby, a woman sings softly in Turkish. The tune drifts through the arches like smoke, like memory. You realize that bathhouses were never really about soap or sweat or scrubbing. They were about togetherness, laughter under domes, secrets traded in whispers, the clatter of sandals in wet corridors. They were about being human, open, messy, and gloriously imperfect. And though your own world may revolve around shower tiles and electric razors, there's still a part of you, deep in the sleepy marrow, that longs for that echoing chamber, the warmth, the waiting towel, the woman with the singing voice. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you're there again. The air grows softer now, the heat easing from a near sweat to a gentle warmth, like the memory of summer caught in stone. You remain seated on the smooth marble bench, your fingers tracing lazy arcs through the condensation. Time stretches like steam, impossibly long, utterly weightless. You're lingering in the final days of medieval bathhouse culture, where rituals, like candles, burn low before they flicker out. And perhaps the most captivating part of this twilight?
the small, stubborn ways people clung to their bathing traditions, even as society shifted beneath their bare feet. In some rural parts of Europe, small community bathhouses continued in secret. Families would gather by appointment, carefully boiling their own water and using pine branches to create makeshift steam. It was no longer glamorous, but it was theirs. A quiet rebellion against the cold, against the changing times. Elsewhere, bathhouses found strange new patrons. Enter the medical community. As theories about humors gave way, slowly, groggily, to more empirical models of health, some physicians began recommending therapeutic bathing again. Not for moral cleansing, of course, heaven forbid you get too comfortable with your body, but for things like nervous afflictions, female hysteria, and general melancholia. Essentially, if you were sad and rich, someone might prescribe you a long soak and call it treatment. Mineral spas popped up across Europe, Baden-Baden in Germany, Bath in England, and Vichy in France. These weren't your cozy neighborhood bathhouses. No, these were full-blown bath resorts. Think marble colonnades, champagne after steam, and at least one man dramatically fainting from vapors every afternoon. Historians still argue whether these therapeutic spas were just elegant placebo factories or genuinely helpful. Regardless, they marked a fascinating evolution, from Roman baths to medieval bathhouses, and now to early modern spa towns. Cleanliness was no longer a daily social event. It had become medicalized, monetized, and glamorized. But let's rewind for a moment to a final glimmer of medieval bathhouse legacy: women's spaces. In parts of the Islamic world, women's hammams continued thriving well after their European cousins faded away. These weren't just cleansing centers, they were spaces of sisterhood. A woman could celebrate her upcoming marriage, soothe her postpartum body, or simply escape a house full of children and goats for a few sacred hours. In these rooms, gossip flowed with the same rhythm as water. Traditional songs were sung between rinses. Babies were passed from one wet arm to another. Elders offered gentle advice while exfoliating a niece's back with surprising vigor. There's even a persistent folktale, origin unclear, about a bride who delayed her entire wedding because she was enjoying the hammam too much. "Let him wait," she supposedly said. "The steam is finally perfect."
And who could blame her? These spaces held power, not just heat. Elsewhere, we see bathhouse echoes appearing in unexpected corners of culture. The Japanese Sento developed rituals of quiet respect, bowing before entering, washing before soaking. The Finnish sauna became a place of both spiritual cleansing and blunt honesty. You haven't lived until you've been scolded by a Finnish grandmother for pouring water too aggressively on hot stones. And the Russian banya, with its birch branch beatings, called venik, added a slightly medieval edge to the experience. There's something sleepily charming about a tradition that involves getting gently whacked by foliage in the name of health. It's part exfoliation, part exorcism, part group therapy. You sit back now, wrapped in a linen cloth. Around you, shadows flicker against pale walls. Somewhere, water trickles continuously, a gentle lullaby. You can almost hear echoes from across the centuries, a giggle in German, a prayer in Arabic, a joke in Latin too risque to translate. This was the magic of bathhouses. They weren't just buildings, they were archives of sound, scent, story. They held humanity in its rawest form, vulnerable, steaming, naked in every sense. And somehow, in those vulnerable moments, people grew stronger. Communities formed. Enemies forgave each other over hot stones and eucalyptus scrubs. Children learned old songs from elders. Lovers flirted, friends laughed, and the lonely found company. And here you are, thousands of years later, imagining all of it, wrapped in your blanket, the hum of your fan playing stand-in for ancient water flows, your room warmed not by steam, but by the soft light of your bedside lamp. Still, the feeling is there, that ancient memory of warmth, of welcome, the sense that somewhere in time, someone handed you a towel and said,
come in. You belong here. The water has cooled now, but you don't mind. You're no longer here for the heat. You've lingered long enough to witness the last breaths of Europe's medieval bathhouses, and now you're watching as the steam clears and the world shifts around them. As the Renaissance rolled in, carrying humanism on its coattails and a suspicious number of ruffled collars, people began to view the body and hygiene differently. On one hand, scholars admired classical Greek and Roman ideals of physical beauty. On the other hand, they still hadn't totally figured out that bathing was good for you. So, for a while, you had this delightful contradiction. Statues of nude gods looking incredibly clean, created by artists who themselves hadn't bathed in weeks. You'd think someone would notice the irony. Still, the Renaissance marked the beginning of the end for traditional bathhouses, especially in cities. The Black Death and syphilis had already soured public opinion, but now something more insidious was happening: fashion. You see, the rising upper classes began to equate privacy with virtue, and public bathing? Well, that was a bit too communal. Suddenly, it wasn't just disease or decay chasing bathhouses out, it was snobbery. Why share a bench with your neighbor when you could have your own copper tub at home? Of course, that tub would take 4 hours to fill, the water would chill within minutes, and the servants might need to heat half a dozen pots on the hearth to get it even lukewarm. But hey, at least you didn't have to share it with someone named Dietrich who sings loudly in the steam room. Yet some bathhouses tried to evolve. A few noble patrons kept private versions going, smaller, quieter, scented with rose petals and rosemary. These elite bathhouses resembled salons or tea parlors more than steamy commons. The mood was less rowdy water party and more softly gossipy spa retreat. You can almost hear the clink of porcelain teacups, the flutter of lace cuffs being discreetly tucked up before a rinse, the staff whisper in velvet slippers, and the water smells faintly of lavender and class anxiety.
But these elite experiments didn't last long. By the 18th century, most had shuttered entirely, their architecture either dismantled or reabsorbed into urban fabric. Walls hidden behind new buildings, marble repurposed for someone's staircase. Imagine slipping down your front steps each morning, never realizing your banister once overlooked a hot plunge pool filled with jokes, flirtation, and occasional herbal foot soaks. Some bathhouses were preserved by accident: a mislaid foundation, a stubborn wall that wouldn't cave. Today, archaeologists occasionally stumble upon these spaces, rooms thick with ghostly condensation and soot-stained ceilings. Each discovery is a memory unearthed, a sigh echoing from the past. Historians still debate whether the decline of bathhouses was inevitable or if a few smarter plumbing decisions could have saved the tradition. Some blame the spread of Protestant modesty. Others point to faulty infrastructure, rising urban pollution, and the general medieval distrust of things that felt too good. You trace your fingers across that idea: pleasure as a problem. In the medieval bathhouse, pleasure wasn't just tolerated, it was baked into the walls, soaked into the benches, sung in the echoes. To wash was to indulge, to relax was to connect. These weren't just hygienic acts, they were deeply human ones. You think of the old woman who always arrived early to warm the bench, the merchant who secretly paid for the widow's soap each week, the children who splashed until the steam muffled their giggles. They're all gone now, and yet, somehow, still present. Every modern bath, every spa day, every hot shower after a cold walk carries a flicker of that history. When you draw your bath tonight, light a candle, or run your fingers through bubbles, you're reenacting a ritual that spans empires, plagues, lovers, and gossip. It's strange, isn't it, to think of a bath as a time machine? Yet here you are, drying your imagined feet on a threadbare medieval towel, scented faintly of juniper and thyme. You've walked centuries without standing up, and now it's time to sleep.
Let the steam in your imagination slowly rise and fade, drifting like breath into the night. The marble tiles you've walked, the laughter you've overheard, the water you've soaked in, they begin to dissolve gently like morning mist pulled away by sunlight. The bathhouse grows quiet now. The last whispers of conversation have melted into the walls. You feel the warm stone beneath your fingertips, the hum of memory trailing along your skin. The torches have burned low, their flicker steady and soothing. Even the echoes have curled up to rest. Breathe in. You've traveled through time, through soap-slicked floors and perfumed air, through centuries of warmth, community, and quiet rebellion. You've sat beside emperors and merchants, midwives and musicians. You've heard the secrets told through steam.
And now you return to your pillow, your room, your steady breath. No need to open your eyes. The world will wait. For now you are clean in every sense, light as a towel, soft as mist. All those centuries, carried lightly on your shoulders, now laid gently down beside you. There is no hurry. Sleep knows where to find you, and when it does, it will come softly, like warm water over tired skin. Good night. End of script. Sweet dreams.